The glass in my hand shook as my father's voice thundered through our family home, rattling the picture frames on the mantel. "Get out, Melody, leave, and don't come back." His face had turned that dangerous shade of purple I'd seen too many times before, veins bulging at his temples. 5 years, 5 long years, I'd been hemorrhaging money through that emergency credit card, and now I dared to ask why they needed another $5,000 after last month's $8,000 crisis. My mother sat frozen on our worn leather couch, her eyes fixed on the carpet, refusing to meet mine. 28 years of being their daughter, their support system, their personal ATM, and this was how it ended. As I turned toward the door, my hand reached for my phone, and I made the decision that would shatter their comfortable illusion forever. The explosion hadn't come from nowhere. 3 hours earlier, I'd walked into my childhood home expecting a quiet Sunday dinner, only to find party streamers hanging from the ceiling and catered food covering every surface of our dining room table. My brother Nathan stood in the center of it all, his arms spread wide like some conquering hero returning from war. 3 years of finding himself across Europe, and my parents acted like he'd just cured cancer. "Melody," my mother had gushed, pulling me into the chaos. "Your brother has the most wonderful news." Nathan's designer clothes and expensive watch told me everything I needed to know about how he'd been finding himself. While I worked 60-hour weeks between my accounting job and weekend tutoring, he'd been living a life of luxury. The champagne they poured came from a bottle that cost more than my weekly grocery budget. "I'm starting my own investment firm." Nathan announced, his voice dripping with unearned confidence. "Revolutionary approach to cryptocurrency and sustainable energy markets. All I need is some initial capital from believers in my vision." My stomach dropped as I watched my parents exchange meaningful glances. My mother clasped her hands together. "We've already discussed it, and we want to be your first investors." How much, I asked, though I already knew this conversation would end badly. "200,000 should cover the initial phase," Nathan said casually, as if discussing pocket change. "Where exactly would this money come from?" My voice came out steadier than I felt. My father's jaw clenched. "Family supports family, Melody. We've always managed to help each other through difficult times." Difficult times. The words tasted bitter. "Is that what we're calling it? Because I have spreadsheets showing exactly how much I've helped over the past 5 years. $180,000 in emergency expenses, medical bills, home repairs, car troubles that never seem to end." "Don't be dramatic," Nathan scoffed, swirling his champagne. "Mom and Dad have been struggling. The least you could do is help out without keeping a running tally like some corporate accountant." "I am a corporate accountant," I shot back. "And funny how their struggles didn't stop them from throwing you this welcome home feast on my credit card." The room went silent. My mother's face paled and my father's expression darkened dangerously. "You've been supporting him," I said, the pieces clicking together with sickening clarity. "All those emergencies, all those desperate calls for help. You've been funneling my money to Nathan. He's our son." My mother finally spoke, her voice shrill with defensiveness. "He needed our support while he found his path." "And what am I?" The question hung in the air like a blade. "Selfish," Nathan supplied helpfully. "You're selfish, Melody. Mom and Dad gave you everything, and now when it's your turn to give back, you're counting pennies." My father stood his chair, scraping against the hardwood floor. "Your brother is right. We've never asked you for anything." "Never asked?" I laughed, but there was no humor in it. The 3 a.m. calls about emergency surgery, the water heater that exploded twice in 1 year, the foundation repairs that mysteriously cost exactly the limit on my credit card. Those were real emergencies. My father's voice rose to that dangerous level I remembered from childhood. "Then show me the receipts," I challenged. "Show me the medical records, the repair invoices, anything that proves where my money actually went." Nathan set down his glass with deliberate slowness. "You know what your problem is, Melody. You've never understood what it means to be part of a family. Everything is transactional with you. Transactional. I pulled out my phone, scrolling to my banking app. Let me show you transactional. January 15th, $5,000 for mom's emergency dental work. February 3rd, $8,000 for dad's car accident repairs. March 22nd, $12,000 for the house's electrical system. Would you like me to continue? Because I have 5 years of transactions that paint a very clear picture. Enough! My father roared, slamming his fist on the table. The champagne glasses jumped, one tipping over and spreading golden liquid across my grandmother's white tablecloth. If you can't support your family without throwing it in our faces, then you're no daughter of mine. Robert, my mother whispered, but he was beyond reasoning. All we've done is love and support you, and this is how you repay us, by humiliating us in front of your brother, by acting like we're some burden you're forced to carry. I looked at Nathan, who smirked behind his glass, then at my mother, who wouldn't meet my eyes, and finally at my father, whose face had reached that purple shade that preceded his worst outbursts. I need to know where my money is going, I said quietly. That's not unreasonable. Unreasonable. My father laughed bitterly. You want to know what's unreasonable? A daughter who keeps score. A daughter who can't give without expecting something in return. A daughter who makes her parents beg for every penny while she lives in her fancy apartment and drives her new car. My apartment has black mold and my car is 12 years old, I corrected, but he wasn't listening. Get out, he said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. Get out of my house. Dad, get out. The roar shook the walls. Leave and don't come back. We don't need your money or your judgment or your spreadsheets. Take your selfishness and get out of our lives. I stood slowly, my legs surprisingly steady. Around me, the remnants of Nathan's celebration seemed to mock everything I'd sacrificed. The catered food I'd unknowingly paid for the champagne, I'd funded the designer clothes, purchased with money I'd earned through exhaustion and dedication. Fine. I said, my voice calm despite the storm raging in my chest. I'll leave, but understand this, when I walk out that door, things change. The emergency credit card, the constant transfers, the financial safety net you've been lounging in for 5 years, it all ends today. Nathan laughed, actually laughed. Sure it does. You'll cave the minute Mom calls crying. You always do. I looked him straight in the eye. Watch me. My mother finally found her voice as I headed for the door. Melody, sweetheart, your father doesn't mean it. Come back and we'll talk about this reasonably. But I was done being reasonable. Done being the family ATM. Done pretending their love wasn't conditional on my ability to pay. As I walked through that doorway, listening to my father's continued ranting about ungrateful daughters and family obligations, I made myself a promise. They wanted to see what life looked like without my support. I'd show them exactly that. The door closed behind me with a quiet click that felt louder than any slam. In my pocket, my phone already had the credit card company's app open. One button. That's all it would take to cut the umbilical cord made of dollars and manipulation. I sat in my car engine running and stared at that cancellation screen. 5 years of being the good daughter. 5 years of sacrificing my own dreams to fund theirs. 5 years of believing that love meant never saying no. My finger hovered over the button as my phone buzzed with a text from Nathan, drama queen. See you next week when you come crawling back. That decided it. I pressed cancel on the card, then called the bank to close the connected account. The representative asked if I was sure, warning me about the permanent nature of the decision. I've never been more sure of anything in my life, I told her. As I drove away from my childhood home, I didn't know that this moment would unravel secrets that had been carefully hidden for decades. I didn't know that my family's house of cards was about to collapse spectacularly. All I knew was that for the first time in 5 years, I was choosing myself. The silence in my car felt like freedom. My apartment greeted me with its familiar musty smell and the sound of dripping water from the kitchen faucet that my landlord kept promising to fix. I dropped my keys on the counter and noticed the blinking light on my answering machine, 12 messages. My hands shook slightly as I poured myself a glass of water, trying to process what had just happened. 5 years of my life reduced to a shouting match over money that was never enough. The first few messages were typical telemarketers, a reminder about my dentist appointment, my coworker asking about a report. Then Aunt Patricia's voice filled my small kitchen, and I nearly dropped my glass. "Melody, honey, it's your Aunt Patricia. I know we haven't spoken since your father made that scene at Christmas 3 years ago, but I need to talk to you urgently. Please call me back as soon as you get this." The next message time-stamped an hour later. "Melody, I'm getting worried. I've been trying to reach you all day. There are things about your family, about your grandmother's will that you need to know, things your parents have been hiding from you." By the fourth message, her voice had taken on a desperate edge. "I'm driving to your apartment. If you get this before I arrive, please don't go anywhere. What I have to tell you can't wait any longer. I should have done this years ago, but I was scared of your father. I'm not scared anymore." A knock at my door interrupted the remaining messages. Through the peephole, I saw Aunt Patricia, my father's older sister who'd been essentially exiled from family gatherings. Her silver hair was pulled back in an elegant bun, and she carried a leather briefcase that looked out of place with her floral dress. "Aunt Patricia." I opened the door genuinely shocked. "How did you know where I live?" "I've always known, sweetheart. I've been keeping an eye on you from a distance." She looked older than I remembered, worry lines etched deeply around her kind eyes. "May I come in?" What I have to share isn't suitable for hallway conversation. I led her to my small living room, hastily clearing magazines from the couch. She sat down carefully, placing the briefcase on my coffee table with reverence. "Your parents called me," she began without preamble, ranting about ungrateful daughters and cut-off credit cards. "Your father was particularly colorful in his language. I'm sorry you had to deal with that." "Don't apologize," she interrupted, holding up a hand. "You've done nothing wrong. In fact, you've done something I should have helped you do years ago. Cut them off completely." The briefcase clicked open, revealing folders, documents, and photographs yellowed with age. Patricia pulled out a thick manila envelope marked with my name in elegant cursive, my grandmother's handwriting. "Your grandmother Eleanor loved you more than life itself." Patricia began, her voice thick with emotion. "When she died 8 years ago, she left very specific instructions in her will, instructions your parents have been violating since day one." "What do you mean?" My mouth felt dry despite the water I'd been sipping. Patricia spread several documents across the table, bank statements, legal papers, and a copy of a will. "Your grandmother left you a substantial inheritance, Melody, $400,000 to be held in trust until your 25th birthday, then transferred to you directly." The room spun slightly. "That's impossible. My parents said Grandma left everything to charity, that there was barely enough to cover funeral expenses." "Your parents lied." Patricia's voice hardened. "They've been lying to you for 8 years. As co-executors of the estate, they had access to the trust under strict conditions, only for your education and welfare, with detailed accounting required." She pulled out another set of papers, these covered in red markings and annotations. "I hired a forensic accountant when I suspected something was wrong. Your parents have been systematically draining your trust through forged documents and false claims. Every emergency they've had in the past 5 years, funded by your inheritance, then supplemented by the money you gave them directly." "But why would they need my money if they already had access to the trust?" Patricia laughed bitterly. "Because they'd already spent most of it by the time you turned 25. They panicked knowing you'd discover the truth when the trust was supposed to transfer. So they created crisis after crisis, conditioning you to give without question, hoping to drain your resources before you could claim what was rightfully yours." She showed me bank records that made my stomach churn. Withdrawals matching the amounts of their emergencies, always just days before they'd call me in tears. Transfers to accounts in Nathan's name dating back to when he first left for Europe. Nathan's entire European adventure, Patricia continued, was funded by your inheritance. The apartment in Barcelona, the trips to Ibiza, the failed business ventures in Prague, all paid for with money meant for your future. "How do you know all this?" I asked, though part of me already knew the answer. Because I've been fighting them in court for 3 years, she admitted, quietly, carefully gathering evidence. Your grandmother named me as alternate executor, but your parents used their position to block me at every turn, until now. She pulled out a final document, this one bearing official court seals. Last month, a judge agreed to review the case based on the evidence I've collected. Your parents don't know yet the hearing is next month, but with what you've told me today about them demanding money while sitting on stolen inheritance, this changes everything. Why didn't you tell me sooner? The betrayal felt like a physical weight on my chest. Patricia's eyes filled with tears. Your father threatened me, said if I contacted you, he'd make sure I never saw any family again. He'd already turned most of our relatives against me with lies about my mental health claims, that I was unstable and fixated on money that didn't exist. I believed that staying quiet and gathering evidence was the best way to protect you. She reached across the table, grasping my hands. But when I heard you'd finally stood up to them, I knew it was time. Your grandmother would be so proud of you, Melody. She always said you had steel in your spine. You just needed to find it. What else did they lie about? I asked, though I wasn't sure I could handle more revelations. Patricia's face grew even more serious. Have you ever wondered why you weren't accepted to any of the universities you applied to? Why your scholarship applications were all rejected? My grades weren't good enough. Your grades were excellent. I have copies of your transcripts. But your parents sabotaged every application, withdrew them, declined offers on your behalf, intercepted acceptance letters. They needed you financially dependent, working instead of studying, too exhausted to ask questions. The room felt too small, the air too thin. Everything I'd believed about my life, my failures, my family, all built on lies. There's more. Patricia said gently. Your grandmother owned rental properties, commercial real estate that generates substantial monthly income. By right, you should have been receiving those profits since you turned 25. Instead, my parents have been collecting it while crying poverty. The pieces clicked together with horrible clarity. That's why Dad could claim disability without working. Why Mom could spend her days at the country club. They've been living off my inheritance while making me feel guilty for not giving more. Patricia nodded grimly. The forensic accountant estimates they've taken close to $1 million over the past 8 years between the trust, the rental income, and the money you've given them directly. And that's conservative. What about Nathan? He's your cousin, not your brother. Patricia's words hit like a sledgehammer. My youngest brother's son. When Nathan's parents died in that car accident 15 years ago, your parents took him in, legally adopted him, which was admirable. But your grandmother never approved. She saw how they favored him over you even then. That's why her will was so specific about the inheritance going only to you. I stood abruptly, needing to move to process this tsunami of information. My tiny apartment, which I'd always been embarrassed to show family, suddenly felt like the only honest thing in my life. So every time they made me feel guilty for having a job, for not giving more, for questioning their needs, they were projecting their own theft onto you, Patricia finished. Classic manipulation tactics. Your father learned from our parents, I'm afraid. But your grandmother saw through it all. That's why she tried to protect you with the trust. Failed to protect me, I corrected bitterly. No, Patricia said firmly. The protection is still there. The judge can order full restitution. With interest and penalties, your parents will have to repay everything they stole. And there's something else, something even they don't know about. She pulled out a sealed envelope from the bottom of the briefcase. Your grandmother was clever. She created a second trust completely separate that only activates when you turn 30. Your parents don't know it exists because she used her maiden name and a different law firm. I'm the only trustee. My hands trembled as I took the envelope. How much? $2 million, plus a portfolio of stocks that have been growing for 20 years. Your grandmother inherited from her father and never touched it, saving it all for you. She knew your parents would try to take the first inheritance, so she created a backup plan. Why me? Why not split it between all the grandchildren? Patricia smiled sadly. Because you were the only one who visited her in the nursing home. The only one who called just to talk, not to ask for money. She saw your heart, Melody, even when you were young. She knew Nathan would grow up spoiled and entitled. She knew your parents would try to break your spirit, so she made sure you'd have the resources to rebuild when you finally broke free. I sank back onto the couch, overwhelmed. In one afternoon, I'd gone from being the family disappointment to discovering I was wealthy, or would be once the legal battles were won. What do I do now? I asked, feeling lost despite the windfall of information. First, you hire a lawyer. I have recommendations. Second, you secure all your personal documents and assets your parents might try to access other accounts if they get desperate. Third, you prepare for war because they won't go down without a fight. And Nathan. Patricia's expression grew sympathetic. Nathan is as much a victim as a perpetrator. Your parents created the monster he became by never saying no, by funding every whim with stolen money. When reality hits, he'll either grow up fast or crash hard. As she gathered her documents, leaving copies for me, I felt the weight of truth settling on my shoulders. The family I'd sacrificed for had been stealing from me since before I was old enough to understand money. The parents who preached about family loyalty had betrayed me in the deepest possible way. The brother I'd envied for their favoritism wasn't even my brother, just another tool in their manipulation. One more thing, Patricia said at the door. Your grandmother left you a letter. She made me promise to give it to you only when you were ready to hear the truth. I think that time is now. The sealed letter felt heavier than paper should. My name was written across it in my grandmother's distinctive handwriting, still elegant despite her age when she wrote it. After Patricia left, I sat in my small kitchen and opened the letter with trembling fingers. My dearest Melody, if you're reading this, then you've finally seen the truth about your parents. I'm sorry I couldn't protect you better in life, but I've done my best to protect your future. Your parents will paint me as a bitter old woman who played favorites. Let them. The truth is simpler. I recognized in you the strength and integrity that skipped their generation. When you were 7, you saved your allowance for 6 months to buy me a birthday present. When you were 12, you volunteered to read to me when my eyes grew weak. When you were 16, you were the only one who asked about my stories, my life, my dreams. You have never been the disappointment they claimed. You have been the only light in a family grown dark with greed. Your inheritance isn't a gift, it's justice. It's the future they tried to steal from you, returned with interest. Be strong, my darling girl. The path ahead will be difficult. They will rage, manipulate, and lie. But you have something they never had: integrity. Use the resources I've left you not just to build your own life, but to become the woman you were meant to be. All my love, Grandma Eleanor. I read the letter 3 more times, tears streaming down my face. Not tears of sadness, but of validation. For the first time in my life, I understood that their treatment of me wasn't about my failures, it was about their greed. My phone buzzed with texts from my mother, each more desperate than the last. Voicemails piled up from my father, his anger giving way to confusion as hours passed without response. Nathan sent a string of mocking messages that gradually shifted to irritation when I didn't react. But I didn't respond to any of them. Instead, I pulled out Aunt Patricia's list of lawyers and started making calls. The battle for my inheritance and my freedom was about to begin. The law offices of Richardson and Associates occupied the top floor of a gleaming downtown high-rise, a far cry from the cramped legal aid clinic I'd almost visited out of habit. Aunt Patricia had insisted on coming with me, her presence a steady comfort as we navigated marble hallways that whispered of serious money and even more serious legal battles. James Richardson himself greeted us, a distinguished man in his 50s with kind eyes and an impressive collection of legal victories against financial predators. Patricia had chosen well. I've reviewed the preliminary documents. he said, gesturing us into a conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. This is one of the most egregious cases of inheritance fraud I've encountered. Your parents weren't just careless with trust funds, they orchestrated deliberate, systematic theft. He spread files across the mahogany table like evidence in a crime scene, which I supposed it was. Let's start with the rental properties. Your grandmother owned 3 buildings in the historic district. Combined monthly rental income, $22,000. $22,000 a month. I couldn't hide my shock. They told me Grandma lived on Social Security that she barely scraped by. Your grandmother was worth approximately $8 million at her death. Richardson continued matter-of-factly. The first trust was just a fraction of her estate. The rental properties alone are valued at $4.5 million in today's market. Patricia pulled out her own folder. I've been watching the properties. Your father hired a management company owned by his golf buddy that charges 40% commission. Industry standard is 8 to 10%. The excess goes into an account under your father's business. What business? I asked, though I dreaded the answer. Richardson pulled up records on his laptop. Hartley Family Investments, LLC, incorporated 6 months after your grandmother's death. Your father listed as CEO, your mother as CFO, Nathan as Director of International Development. International Development. I laughed bitterly. His development consisted of developing bar tabs across Europe. About that, Patricia interjected. I had a private investigator look into Nathan's activities abroad. She slid photos across the table, Nathan at exclusive clubs on yachts at high-stakes poker games. Your inheritance funded quite the lifestyle, but that's not the interesting part. She produced bank statements with transactions highlighted. Nathan wasn't just spending, he was investing. Failed investments, a nightclub in Prague that closed after 3 months, an import-export business in Amsterdam that never imported or exported anything, a cryptocurrency startup in London that was essentially a pyramid scheme. How much did he lose? Conservative estimate $600,000 over 3 years. But here's where it gets interesting. Every failed business was somehow connected to recovering the lost money. He'd claim the nightclub was robbed, the import business faced unexpected regulations. The crypto startup was hacked. Insurance claims were filed, though mysteriously never paid out. Richardson leaned forward. This establishes a pattern of fraud that goes beyond simple theft. They were using your inheritance to fund potential money laundering operations. Money laundering. The room suddenly felt cold. We can't prove intent yet, Richardson clarified, but the pattern is suspicious. Multiple failed businesses, insurance claims, international transfers. It raises red flags. I've seen similar schemes where families use inherited wealth to wash illegal gains through seemingly legitimate failures. Patricia pulled out another document. There's more. Your father has been collecting disability payments for 5 years, claiming a back injury from his construction days. But I have photos of him playing golf twice a week, tennis at the country club, even helping Nathan move furniture last month. The photos were damning. My father lifting heavy boxes, swinging golf clubs with perfect form, not a hint of the debilitating pain he'd described in tearful phone calls asking for money. So he's been committing disability fraud while stealing my inheritance and running suspicious businesses. I felt nauseous. It gets worse, Richardson said gently. The IRS has been investigating your father's business for 2 years. They've frozen several accounts pending review. My contacts suggest they're building a tax evasion case. He hasn't reported the rental income, claiming the properties are vacant and generating losses. But they're fully rented, Patricia confirmed. I have copies of every lease agreement. Your parents have been collecting rent while claiming poverty to you and losses to the IRS. Richardson pulled up more records. Your mother isn't innocent either. She's been filing insurance claims on the properties, water damage, electrical issues, foundation problems. The same issues she called you about, claiming they needed emergency funds to fix. But the insurance paid out each time and no repairs were made. double dipping, getting money from insurance and from you for the same fictional problems. How did they think they'd get away with this? I asked, overwhelmed by the scope of their deception. They assumed you'd never find out, Patricia said quietly. Your grandmother's will specified you'd receive full control of the estate at 30. They had 2 more years to cover their tracks, maybe fabricate documents showing the money was spent legitimately on your welfare. Your decision to cut them off forced their hand. Richardson nodded. Based on communication patterns, they planned to claim bankruptcy just before your 30th birthday, saying bad investments and medical bills consumed the inheritance. You'd inherit debt-ridden properties and empty accounts, never knowing millions had been siphoned away. But Nathan's the key to unraveling everything, Patricia added. His lifestyle, his failed businesses, his connections, he's the weak link. And according to my investigator, he's in serious trouble. She showed me recent photos. Nathan looked haggard, constantly checking over his shoulder. He owes money to the wrong people. His last business venture involves some very dangerous individuals who don't accept the project failed as an excuse for missing money. Is he in danger? Despite everything, I felt a twinge of concern. He's made his own bed, Patricia said firmly. But it explains why your parents are desperate for your money. They're not just funding their lifestyle, they're trying to keep Nathan from facing consequences of his actions. Richardson organized the evidence into neat piles. Here's what we're going to do. First, file an emergency injunction to freeze all estate assets. No more transfers, no more access. Second, demand full accounting of every penny spent from the trust. Third, pursue criminal charges for fraud, theft, and tax evasion. Criminal charges. The reality hit me. They could go to prison. Your father faces up to 20 years for tax evasion alone. The inheritance fraud adds another 10. Your mother's insurance fraud could mean 5 to 7. Nathan's situation depends on what federal investigators find about his international activities. I stared at the evidence of my family's crimes, trying to reconcile the parents who'd raised me with the criminals described in these documents. I just wanted them to stop taking my money. I didn't want to destroy their lives. Patricia gripped my hand. They destroyed their own lives with greed. You're just holding up a mirror to their actions. There's something else, Richardson added carefully. The second trust your grandmother created, the one they don't know about. It's worth considerably more than $2 million now, closer to $4 million with investment growth. But accessing it might tip them off to its existence. What do you recommend? Wait until after the criminal proceedings. Let them think they've taken everything that you're fighting for scraps. When they're convicted and ordered to pay restitution, reveal the second trust. It ensures you'll be whole, regardless of what they can repay. Smart, Patricia agreed. Your grandmother would approve. She always said the best revenge was living well while wrongdoers faced justice. Richardson's assistant knocked, bringing coffee and a stack of additional documents. I've prepared the initial filings. We can have the injunction in place by tomorrow, freezing all accounts connected to the estate. Your parents will be served notice within 48 hours. How will they react? I asked, though I suspected I knew. Badly, he said honestly. Expect escalation, emotional manipulation, public scenes, possibly attempting to access your personal accounts or credit. We should discuss protective measures. For the next hour, we planned my defense against the storm that was coming. New bank accounts they couldn't access, credit monitoring to prevent identity theft, even a restraining order if their harassment escalated. It felt surreal preparing for war against the people who'd raised me. As we finished, Richardson pulled me aside. I want you to understand something. What your parents did, it's not normal family dysfunction. It's criminal conspiracy. You're not breaking up your family by pursuing this. They broke it the moment they stole your first dollar. I keep thinking about Sunday dinners, I admitted. Birthday parties, Christmas mornings. Were they ever real, or was I just a resource to be exploited? Both can be true, he said kindly. They may have loved you in their way, but greed corrupted that love into something toxic. Your grandmother saw it happening, which is why she tried to protect you. Patricia hugged me as we left the office. "I know this is overwhelming, but you're doing the right thing. Your grandmother would be so proud of your courage." "I don't feel courageous," I confessed. "I feel like I'm drowning in lies." "The truth is like that at first," she said. "But once you surface, you'll breathe freely for the first time in your life." That night, I sat in my apartment surrounded by copies of evidence, each document another nail in my family's coffin. My phone had 63 missed calls, texts alternating between my mother's tears and my father's rage. Nathan had moved on to threats promising I'd regret betraying the family. But as I looked at my grandmother's photo, the one where she smiled directly at the camera with knowing eyes, I felt something shift. This wasn't betrayal. This was justice years in the making. Tomorrow the legal notices would be served. Tomorrow their house of cards would begin its inevitable collapse. Tomorrow I'd truly begin fighting for the life they'd tried to steal. But tonight I raised a glass of wine to the woman who'd loved me enough to protect me from beyond the grave. "Thank you, Grandma," I whispered. "I understand now." The wine tasted like freedom. 2 weeks of silence can drive guilty people insane. I'd learned this watching my phone light up with increasingly frantic messages while I followed my lawyer's advice to maintain complete radio silence. Richardson had been clear. Let them wonder, let them worry, let them reveal their true priorities. I was reviewing quarterly reports at my desk when my phone exploded with calls. The first from my father, which I let go to voicemail, the second from my mother, the third from Nathan. Then the cycle repeated with increasing frequency until my phone vibrated itself off my desk. Finally curious about what had triggered this fresh panic, I listened to the messages. My father's voice, usually so controlled and commanding, shook with barely contained rage. "Melody, what did you do? The card was declined at the Mercedes dealership. Do you have any idea how humiliating it was to have the salesman look at me like I'm some kind of deadbeat, call me back immediately?" My mother's message played next, her voice pitched high with hysteria. "Sweetheart, there must be some mistake. I was at the club for the monthly luncheon, you know, the one I organized for the hospital charity, and my card was declined in front of everyone. In front of Judge Harrison's wife, I had to pretend I'd grabbed the wrong card. Please, honey, fix this right away." Nathan's messages progressed from confusion to fury. "Hey, what's wrong with the card? I need to pay rent." "Melody, this isn't funny. My landlord is threatening eviction. Are you serious right now? Do you know what happens if I can't pay? These aren't the kind of people who accept excuses." By the 15th voicemail, the pattern was clear. The supplementary cards I'd foolishly added to my account years ago, just for emergencies, they'd promised, had all been frozen when I closed the account. The family that had been living on my credit had just discovered their free ride was over. I forwarded the messages to Richardson, who responded within minutes. "Perfect timing. They've just been served with the legal notices. Let them connect the dots." Unable to resist seeing the full picture, I logged into my old credit card account one final time before it closed permanently. The attempted charges from the past 2 weeks painted a vivid picture of my family's priorities. Mercedes-Benz of Arlington, $42,000. Declined Cherrywood Country Club, $8,300. Declined European Luxury Rentals, $12,000. Declined Bergdorf Goodman, $6,700. Declined first-class airline tickets to Monaco, $18,000. Declined. The list went on. In 2 weeks, they'd attempted to charge over $100,000, not for medical emergencies or home repairs, but for luxury cars, vacation homes, designer clothes, and international travel. My desk phone rang. My parents had resorted to calling my workplace. I let it go to voicemail, but Sandra, my boss, knocked on my door moments later. "Your father just called reception," she said, her expression sympathetic but firm. "He was quite vocal. Security has his photo now. He won't be allowed in the building." "I'm so sorry," I began, but she cut me off. "Don't apologize for other people's behavior, but maybe you should listen to this." She handed me her phone where she'd recorded my father's rant to the receptionist. His voice boomed through the speaker. I demand to speak to my daughter immediately. This is a family emergency. If you don't transfer me right now, I'll come down there myself. She thinks she can destroy her family, hide behind lawyers. I'll show her what happens when you bite the hand that fed you." "That's a threat," Sandra said quietly. "I'm documenting this for HR and recommending increased security for you. Do you have somewhere safe to stay?" I nodded, grateful for her support. Patricia had insisted I stay with her until things calmed down, and now I understood why. My phone rang again, this time my mother, and against my better judgment, I answered. "Finally," she gasped. "Melody, sweetheart, what's happening? Your father received some legal papers, and he's destroying the house. He threw your grandmother's china at the wall." "The Wedgwood set," I asked, remembering how she'd always claimed it would be mine someday. "This isn't about dishes," she screeched. "You've hired lawyers. You're suing your own parents after everything we've done for you." "Everything you've done? You mean stealing my inheritance?" The silence lasted so long I thought she'd hung up. When she spoke again, her voice had turned cold. "I don't know what Patricia has been telling you, but she's always been jealous of our family. She's filling your head with lies. Lies with documentation. Lies with bank records. Lies with proof of tax evasion. You're really going to destroy us over money." She played her last card, the tears. "Your father's disability could be revoked. We could lose the house. Is that what you want? The house you bought with my grandmother's money, the disability payments Dad collects while playing 18 holes twice a week. Yes, Mom, that's exactly what I want. Justice." "Justice?" She laughed bitterly. "You want to see your parents in prison? You want Nathan homeless on the streets?" "Nathan's housing situation is his problem. Maybe if you hadn't funded his every whim with stolen money, he'd have learned responsibility." "How dare you?" "No, Mom. How dare you? How dare you steal from your own daughter? How dare you sabotage my education? How dare you lie for 8 years while I worked myself to exhaustion trying to help you?" "We're your parents," she screamed. "We gave you life. We raised you. You owe us everything." "I owe you nothing. And after what you've done, you're nothing to me." The words came out calmer than I felt, but their impact was immediate. She gasped as if I'd slapped her. "You'll regret this," she whispered. "When you're alone with your money and your righteousness, you'll regret losing your family." "I lost my family the day you chose greed over love. I'm just making it official." I hung up and blocked her number, then did the same for my father and Nathan. The liberation felt immediate, as if chains I hadn't realized I was wearing had suddenly snapped. Richardson called an hour later. "They've retained counsel, Donovan and Associates." "Is that bad?" "It's expensive. They're burning through money they claim not to have. But Donovan just called. Your parents want to negotiate." "What could they possibly offer? They stole everything." "They're proposing a payment plan. They'll admit to mismanaging the trust, but claim it was done with good intentions. They want to repay over 20 years with minimal interest." "How much would that be?" "About 30 cents on the dollar paid out over 2 decades. It's insulting." "Counter with full restitution within 90 days, or we proceed with criminal charges." Richardson paused. "That's aggressive. They'll never accept." "Good. I want them to refuse. I want every refusal documented. When this goes to criminal court, I want the jury to see they had chances to make it right and chose not to." "You've gotten stronger," he observed. "Good. You'll need it." Donovan mentioned they're planning a public relations campaign, painting you as a money-hungry daughter, abandoning elderly parents. "Let them. I have receipts for every luxury purchase they've made while claiming poverty." That evening, Patricia picked me up from work in her reliable sedan, so different from the Mercedes my father had tried to buy with my credit. Her house in the suburbs felt like a sanctuary, quiet, honest, filled with photos of the grandmother my parents had robbed. "They called me too," she said over dinner. "Robert threatened to sue me for turning you against them." I laughed and reminded him I have 30 years of evidence of his schemes. He hung up rather quickly. "How did he become this way? You grew up in the same house." Patricia sighed. Your grandfather favored Robert, gave him everything while expecting me to be grateful for scraps. When I started my accounting firm, Robert mocked me for playing businesswoman. When I succeeded, he expected me to fund his ventures. I refused, so he found other sources, first our parents' savings, then your grandmother's sympathy, finally your inheritance. And Nathan was Robert's chance to raise the son he really wanted. Generous, flashy, unquestioning. Everything you weren't. When Nathan's parents died, Robert saw an opportunity to create his legacy. Your money just funded that delusion. My phone buzzed with an unknown number. Against better judgment, I answered. Melody. Nathan's voice, but different, scared, desperate. Please don't hang up. I'm in trouble. Real trouble. The people I owe, they don't care that the money's gone. They want payment or what Nathan... They'll hurt me. Maybe worse. I need $50,000 by tomorrow or... Then I suggest you ask the parents who funded your lifestyle for 3 years. Oh wait, they're broke without my credit card. This isn't a game. His voice cracked. They know where I live, where Mom and Dad live. They've made threats. Then go to the police. With what hey officers I owe money to criminals from my failed money laundering scheme, they'll arrest me. Good, you belong in jail. You're really going to let them kill me? You're really going to blame me for your choices? Goodbye, Nathan. I hung up and blocked that number too. Patricia watched with concern. Should we worry about these people he owes? She asked. We should let the FBI worry about them. Richardson's already reported Nathan's activities. If dangerous people are involved, that's evidence of the crimes my parents funded. You've become quite ruthless, Patricia observed, though not critically. No, I corrected. I've become honest about who they are. There's a difference. That night, I lay in Patricia's guest room staring at the ceiling. Somewhere across town, my parents were discovering what life looked like without my support. Nathan was facing consequences he'd never imagined possible. The family that had taken everything from me was finally paying the price. But I felt no satisfaction, only relief. The weight I'd carried for years, the guilt and obligation and false love, had evaporated with the credit card cancellation. For the first time in my adult life, my money was mine. My choices were mine. My future was mine. Tomorrow would bring new battles, legal proceedings, public drama, escalating desperation. But tonight I slept peacefully in a bed, bought with honest money in a house built on truth rather than lies. The canceled card had done more than cut off their funds. It had cut the puppet strings they'd used to control me for years. And for the first time, I was standing on my own feet, surprised to find they were steadier than I'd ever imagined. The social media assassination began at 6 a.m. I woke to Patricia's urgent knocking and her phone thrust in my face, showing my mother's Facebook post, already gathering sympathy like flies to honey. To all our dear friends and family, the post read, "It is with broken hearts that we share our daughter. Melody has abandoned us in our time of greatest need. Despite raising her with love and sacrificing everything for her success, she has cut us off, completely canceled the financial support we depend on for Robert's medical care, and hired lawyers to attack us with false accusations. We are elderly disabled and now facing homelessness because of our own daughter's greed. Please pray for us and, if possible, help us through this difficult time. We never thought the child we loved would betray us this way." Attached were photos carefully curated for maximum emotional impact. My father in a back brace he apparently only wore for photographs, my mother looking frail and tearful, even one of them standing in front of their house with a "for sale" sign clearly photoshopped into the yard. The comments were already pouring in. Church friends expressing shock, distant relatives offering prayers, neighbors volunteering to start meal trains. Each sympathetic response was another knife twisted in my reputation. "Don't read them," Patricia advised, but it was too late. "I can't believe Melody would do this to you. What kind of daughter abandons sick parents? You gave her everything, and this is how she repays you. Some children are just born selfish. You did your best." My phone started ringing blocked numbers I didn't answer, but the voicemails painted a clear picture. Former family friends calling me heartless, church members offering to pray for my soul, relatives I hadn't spoken to in years suddenly invested in shaming me into submission. But my mother's Facebook campaign was just the opening salvo. By noon, Nathan had launched a GoFundMe titled, "Help My Parents Avoid Homelessness After Daughter's Betrayal." The description was a masterpiece of manipulation. My elderly parents, Robert and Linda, have been abandoned by their daughter, Melody, who became successful thanks to their sacrifices. Now, when they need her most, she has cut them off, frozen their accounts, and sicked lawyers on them. My father is disabled and requires constant medical care. My mother has chronic health conditions. They face losing their home of 30 years. As their adopted son, I'm desperately trying to help, but I'm struggling too. Any amount helps. Let's show them that kindness still exists even when family fails. He'd set the goal at $200,000, conveniently close to what they'd stolen from me over the years. Within hours, donations started trickling in. $20 from a church friend, $50 from a neighbor, $100 from a relative in Texas, who included a note about ungrateful children. "Should we report it as fraud?" I asked Richardson over the phone. "Document everything, but don't engage yet," he advised. "Let them dig their hole deeper. Every lie they tell publicly is evidence of their desperation and continued deception." The afternoon brought phase 3 of their campaign, direct attacks on my employment. My boss, Sandra, called me into her office, her expression grim. "Your father sent an email to the entire board of directors," she said, sliding a printed copy across her desk. "I've already discussed it with HR and our legal team, but you should see what he's claiming." The email was unhinged, accusing me of embezzling company funds to pay for my lavish lifestyle while my disabled parents starved. He claimed I was mentally unstable, suggested I might be stealing from clients, and demanded the company investigate my suspicious wealth that allowed me to hire expensive lawyers. "He's trying to get me fired," I said, stunned by the boldness of the lies. "He's trying but failing," Sandra corrected. "Our IT department traced some interesting patterns. Your father has been sending these emails from different addresses, but they all originate from the same IP. He's also been leaving reviews on our company website under fake names, all claiming you're unethical and shouldn't be trusted with finances." She pulled up screenshots, dozens of one-star reviews, all posted within the same hour, all hitting the same talking points about my abandonment of family and questionable ethics. "This is defamation," I said. "It's desperation," Sandra replied, "and it's backfiring. The board is fully supportive. They see this for what it is, an extinction burst from manipulative people losing control. But I need to ask, is there any chance they could access company systems? Any passwords you might have shared?" "Never. I've always kept work completely separate." "Good. We're increasing security protocols anyway. Your badge now requires secondary verification, and we've flagged your accounts for additional monitoring. Not because we don't trust you," she added quickly, "but to protect you from any attempts at sabotage." "You've been incredibly supportive through this," I said, touched by her efforts. Sandra's expression softened. "I told you I recognized the pattern. My brother tried something similar when I cut him off for his gambling addiction. He called my clients, sent letters to regulators, even showed up at a conference claiming I'd stolen his inheritance. Addicts and abusers follow the same playbook when they lose their supply." That evening, the campaign escalated again. Patricia and I were preparing dinner when her doorbell rang repeatedly, urgently. Through the peephole, we saw my mother standing on the porch, but she wasn't alone. She'd brought reinforcements, 3 women from her church group, including Mrs. Henderson, who taught my Sunday school class 20 years ago. "Don't open it," Patricia warned, but my mother had already spotted movement through the window. "Melody," she cried out, "I know you're in there. Please, we just want to talk. Mrs. Henderson has come all this way. She has something important to tell you." Against Patricia's advice, I opened the door but kept the chain on. My mother had lost weight. Her usually perfect hair unstyled her designer clothes, replaced with deliberately dowdy items I'd never seen her wear. The performance was Oscar-worthy. Melody dear. Mrs. Henderson began her voice exactly as I remembered from childhood. Your mother has told us everything. How can you turn your back on the people who gave you life? The Bible says honor thy father and mother. The Bible also says thou shalt not steal, I responded. Did she tell you about the $1 million they stole from my inheritance? My mother gasped dramatically. Those lies again, Patricia has poisoned your mind. We only ever tried to protect your money to invest it wisely. In Nathan's failed nightclubs, in luxury cars, in country club memberships. The church ladies exchanged uncertain glances. My mother, sensing the shift, changed tactics. Even if we made mistakes, is that worth destroying your family? Worth seeing your elderly parents homeless? Your father cries every night, Melody. His heart can't take this stress. If he has another heart attack, his blood will be on your hands. Another heart attack. When was the first one? She faltered. Well, the doctors said he's at risk. Just like his back injury that disappears on the golf course. Just like your chronic illness that no legitimate doctor has diagnosed. Mrs. Henderson stepped back slightly. Linda, you said Robert was bedridden. He is most days. Today is a good day, but tomorrow... Stop. My voice cut through her performance. Mrs. Henderson, I have video from yesterday of my father playing tennis at the country club. Would you like to see it? The church ladies suddenly found urgent reasons to leave. As they hurried to their cars, my mother's mask finally slipped. You little witch, she hissed. You think you've won. You have no idea what we're capable of. Nathan knows people. Dangerous people. One word from him and what, mother, you'll have me hurt, killed. Is that what you've become? Patricia stepped into view, her phone clearly recording. Please do continue with the threats. The police will find this very interesting. My mother's face went white. Without another word, she fled to her car, leaving her carefully crafted image of the suffering mother in ruins on Patricia's porch. But they weren't done. That night, my personal email filled with messages. Nathan had apparently shared my contact information on several forums dedicated to ungrateful children and elder abuse by adult kids. The messages ranged from disappointed lectures to outright threats. You're what's wrong with this generation. I hope you end up alone and penniless like you're leaving your parents. Karma will get you for this selfishness. Your parents should have aborted you. Between the hate mail, 3 messages stood out. The first from my cousin Sarah. I saw the GoFundMe. Did you know they did the same thing 5 years ago when Grandpa died? Claimed you refused to help with funeral expenses and raised $15,000. The funeral was already paid for by his insurance. The second from a number I didn't recognize. Ms. Hartley, this is Maria Santos. I'm the woman Nathan claimed was his pregnant girlfriend. I need to speak with you urgently about your brother's illegal activities. He doesn't know I'm FBI. The third made my blood run cold. You don't know me, but I know Nathan. He owes my associates $200K. Family debts carry over. You have 1 week to pay or we visit your parents first. Then this isn't a threat. It's a promise. I forwarded everything to Richardson and the FBI contact he'd provided. Within an hour, I had responses. The FBI wanted to meet immediately about Nathan's connections. Richardson was filing for emergency restraining orders against my entire family. This escalation is actually good news, Richardson explained during our emergency video call. They're panicking, making mistakes, creating evidence. The social media posts prove they're not destitute. The threats establish a pattern of harassment. The GoFundMe might constitute fraud since they're lying about their circumstances. How is any of this good? I asked, exhausted by the day's emotional warfare. Because desperate people reveal their true nature. Your mother threatened you on camera. Your father is defaming you in writing. Nathan's connections to criminals create federal jurisdiction. They're not just losing the civil case, they're building the criminal one against themselves. As I prepared for bed in Patricia's guest room, my phone buzzed with one final message. A text from my mother's number. but the writing style was clearly my father's. Last chance, Melody. Drop the lawyers, restore the money, and we'll forget this happened. You have 24 hours to come to your senses. After that, we'll destroy you like you're trying to destroy us. You think you know the truth about your inheritance? You know nothing. There are things about your real father that would ruin you. Things we've protected you from. Don't force our hand. I stared at the message, my heart racing. My real father. What could they possibly mean? My parents had been married for 35 years. I'd seen my birth certificate, the hospital photos. Everything seemed normal. Patricia found me sitting on the bed phone, trembling in my hand. She read the message and sighed deeply. I wondered if they'd go there, she said quietly. Go where? What are they talking about? She sat beside me, taking my hand. Your mother had an affair early in their marriage. Your biological father was actually a wealthy businessman who wanted nothing to do with a baby. Robert agreed to raise you as his own in exchange for financial consideration. The room tilted. You mean they sold me? No, not exactly. But there was money involved. Your grandmother knew, which is partly why she left everything to you and not Robert. She felt you deserved security after such a complicated start. Why didn't anyone tell me? Because it doesn't matter, Patricia said firmly. Robert raised you badly, but still. Biology doesn't change the legal facts of the inheritance or their theft. This is just another manipulation, another desperate attempt to hurt and control you. I looked at the thread again, then did something that surprised me. I laughed. Actually laughed. Let them tell whoever they want, I said. They think this is leverage. All it proves is that they've been lying to me since birth. Just add it to the pile of deceptions. I typed my response. Thank you for the additional evidence of blackmail and extortion. My lawyers will be thrilled. Your 24 hours started the moment you stole your first dollar from me. Time's already up. Then I blocked the number and turned off my phone. Tomorrow would bring new battles, but tonight I'd won. Their desperate manipulations had revealed the depth of their corruption. Every threat, every lie, every public performance just added weight to my case. They'd tried to destroy me with guilt, with public shame, with threats of violence and family secrets. But all they'd managed to destroy was any lingering doubt about my decision. The family I'd mourned was a fiction. These desperate, dangerous strangers wearing familiar faces, they were the reality I'd been too blind to see. But my eyes were open now, and nothing they did could close them again. Richardson's law firm transformed into a war room. Boxes of evidence lined the conference room walls, screens displayed financial forensics, and a team of associates worked around the clock building our case. When I arrived for our strategy meeting, the controlled chaos felt like vindication taking shape. Your family's desperation tactics have actually strengthened our position. Richardson began gesturing to a wall covered in printed screenshots. Every threat, every lie, every public manipulation, they've created a perfect trail of evidence. James's associate, a sharp young woman named Chen Wei, pulled up a presentation. We've documented 47 instances of defamation across social media platforms, 16 threatening communications, and 3 attempts at blackmail. Your father's emails to your employer alone constitute felony harassment. But that's just the appetizer, Richardson continued. Our forensic accountant finished analyzing 20 years of financial records. Your parents didn't just steal your inheritance, they've been running multiple fraud schemes since before you were born. The numbers on screen made my head spin. Shell companies, fake charities, insurance fraud dating back decades. My inheritance was just their latest and largest score. How did they get away with it for so long? They were smart enough to keep individual thefts under reporting thresholds, Wei explained. Death by 1,000 cuts rather than one massive fraud, until your grandmother's estate. That's where greed overcame caution. Richardson pulled up another screen. Now about Nathan. The FBI has been very interested in our information. Agent Maria Santos, the woman who contacted you, has been undercover for 18 months, investigating international money laundering. Nathan walked right into her operation. She was investigating him specifically. No, she was investigating the criminals he borrowed from. Nathan was just a useful idiot who gave her access. But his connection to your parents' fraud creates a beautiful web for prosecutors. Patricia arrived with her own boxes of evidence. I've been busy too. Remember those rental properties your parents claimed were losing money? I have 20 years of tenant records. Every rent check, every lease agreement, every maintenance request. She spread documents across the table. Your parents collected approximately $4.8 million in rent over 8 years while claiming the properties were vacant. That's tax fraud on a massive scale. The IRS has entered the chat, Richardson said with grim satisfaction. They're conducting a full audit going back 7 years, the maximum they can prosecute. Conservative estimate your parents owe $2.3 million in back taxes, penalties, and interest. They don't have $2.3 million, I pointed out. No, but they have assets. The house, the cars, your mother's jewelry collection, your father's boat, all purchased with stolen money, all subject to seizure. We pulled up property records. Speaking of assets, we've found 12 properties titled in various shell companies your father controls. Commercial real estate, vacant land, even a beach house in Delaware your parents never mentioned. A beach house. I felt fresh anger surge. They have a beach house while claiming they needed my help to keep the lights on. Had, Richardson corrected. Past tense. The court approved our emergency injunction. Every asset is now frozen pending investigation. Your parents can't sell, transfer, or borrow against anything. Which explains this, Patricia said, showing me her phone. More GoFundMe pages had appeared overnight. Help Robert's heart surgery. Linda's cancer treatment fund. Innocent parents destroyed by vengeful daughter, each with increasingly dramatic stories, none remotely true. Are people actually donating? Some, but GoFundMe is investigating. Fraud on their platform is a federal crime. Your parents are digging their grave deeper with every lie. Richardson's assistant entered with fresh documents. The restraining orders were approved. Your parents and Nathan are prohibited from coming within 500 feet of you, your workplace, or Patricia's house. Any violation is immediate arrest. Good timing, I said, showing them the latest texts from burner phones. More threats, more blackmail attempts, more desperate promises to reveal the truth about my biological father. About that, Richardson said carefully. We've investigated your parents' threat. Your biological father was indeed a different man, Dr. Marcus Webb, a prominent surgeon. He died 10 years ago, left his estate to medical charities. There's no scandal to expose just adults who made complicated choices 30 years ago. They're threatening to expose a dead man who left money to charity. I almost laughed at the absurdity. Desperation makes people stupid, Patricia observed. Speaking of which, Nathan's situation has deteriorated. She showed us news articles from European papers. Nathan was wanted for questioning in 3 countries regarding investment fraud. His face appeared on financial crime watch lists. The dangerous people he owed money to were themselves under investigation. He can't run without money, Way noted, and with the accounts frozen, he's trapped. Which brings us to our counteroffensive. Richardson said, his tone shifting to battle mode. We're not just defending anymore, we're attacking. Criminal charges have been filed: fraud, theft, tax, evasion, identity theft, blackmail, harassment. The district attorney is personally overseeing the case. Why personal involvement? Because your case is perfect for prosecution. Clear evidence, sympathetic victim defendants who keep creating more evidence against themselves. The DA sees career-making convictions. He pulled up a timeline. Here's how this plays out. Next week, formal arraignment. Your parents will be arrested, processed, and released on bail if they can afford it with frozen assets. The criminal trial starts in approximately 6 months. The civil case for inheritance recovery runs parallel. 6 months. It felt both too long and too soon. That's lightning speed for financial crimes. The evidence is overwhelming. Our bigger challenge is asset recovery. Your parents have been spending stolen money for 8 years. Getting full restitution may require selling every asset they own. What about the second trust? I asked. The one they don't know about? Richardson smiled. That's your ace in the hole. Let them think they've destroyed your future. When criminal convictions come down and civil judgments are entered, reveal the second trust. You'll be whole, regardless of what we recover. There's more good news, Patricia added. Your grandmother's business, the one you would have inherited if you'd gone to college, it still exists, managed by a trustee. With the fraud exposed, control can transfer to you. What kind of business? Medical equipment supply, very profitable. The trustee has grown it conservatively, waiting for the rightful heir to claim it. Current valuation, $12 million. I sat back stunned. Every revelation showed how much my parents had stolen not just money, but opportunities, education, and entire life path. Now, Richardson continued, we need to discuss Nathan's criminal associates. The FBI wants you in protective custody until they're arrested. Is that really necessary? 3 of them were spotted near your apartment building yesterday. Yes, it's necessary. Agent Santos arrived an hour later, her pregnant persona replaced by sharp professionalism. Miss Hartley, your brother stumbled into something bigger than anyone realized. The people he owes money to are part of an international trafficking ring. We've been building a case for 2 years. Nathan's debts gave us the final connections we needed. Trafficking. My stomach turned. Drugs, weapons, money laundering. Nathan thought he was borrowing from high-stakes gamblers. He was actually funding terrorists. His failed businesses were supposed to be money laundering fronts. When they failed legitimately, he couldn't repay dirty money with clean funds. How much danger am I in? Moderate. They prefer threatening families to create pressure. But with Nathan broke and your parents' assets frozen, they may escalate. We're moving on arrests within 72 hours. Until then, we need you somewhere safe. The safe house turned out to be a comfortable apartment in a security building. FBI agents rotated shifts while I worked remotely, watching my family's empire crumble through news reports and legal filings. Day 1. My parents' mugshots appeared on local news. Prominent couple arrested for $1 million inheritance fraud. Day 2. Nathan was arrested trying to board a flight to Brazil. Man detained in connection with international money laundering investigation. Day 3. The FBI raids captured Nathan's associates. Major trafficking ring dismantled, local man key to investigation. Richardson visited daily with updates. Your parents' lawyer quit. Apparently they tried to pay him with a check from a frozen account. They're now using a public defender. For $1 million fraud case, they have no choice. Every decent lawyer demands retainer up front, and they have no accessible funds. Even their GoFundMe was frozen after reports of fraud. Patricia brought dinner and gossip. The country club revoked their membership. The church asked them not to return pending resolution of legal matters. Your mother's charity committee expelled her for conduct unbecoming. Their entire social circle abandoned them. Rats fleeing a sinking ship. Plus, several club members realized they'd also been scammed over the years. Your parents borrowed money for emergencies from half the membership. On the 4th day, something unexpected happened. My phone rang with a call from the detention center. Against my better judgment, I accepted. Melody. My mother's voice sounded broken, aged 20 years in 4 days. Please, I need to... If you're calling to threaten or manipulate, I'm hanging up. No, I need to tell you something. About the money. There's more. Hidden accounts Robert doesn't know about. I'll tell you everything if you help me. Help you how? Get me away from him. File charges separately. I was just following his lead, trying to be a good wife. He threatened me too. Said he'd leave me with nothing if I didn't comply. I have evidence. Recordings. I shouldn't have been surprised. When criminals face consequences, they turn on each other. Even marriages built on greed couldn't survive the pressure of prosecution. Tell your public defender. Maybe they'll cut a deal. Melody, please. I'm your mother. No, I cut her off. A mother protects her child. You sold yours. Goodbye, Linda. I hung up feeling oddly empty. Not sad, just finished. The woman who gave birth to me was offering to betray the man who raised me, and I felt nothing beyond mild disgust. Richardson found the development interesting. If she really has evidence against your father, it strengthens the prosecution. She'll likely get a lighter sentence in exchange for cooperation. How light? Instead of 20 years, maybe 5. Still prison, still a felony record, still the end of life as she knew it. That night in the safe house, I video called Patricia. I keep waiting to feel guilty, I confessed. They're facing prison bankruptcy, complete destruction. Shouldn't I feel something? You are feeling something, she observed. Relief, which is exactly what you should feel when abusers face justice. Guilt would mean they'd successfully programmed you to prioritize their needs over your own well-being. The fact that you don't feel guilty, that's healing, Melody. That's growth. She was right. As I watched the news coverage of my family's downfall, I felt no satisfaction but no regret either. Just a sense of cosmic balance being restored of truth, finally conquering lies. The criminal case was building momentum. The civil case promised full restitution. My future stolen for so long was being returned with interest. And the family that had caused so much pain, they were learning what happened when the well of exploitation finally ran dry. Justice, I was learning, didn't always feel triumphant. Sometimes it just felt like the end of a very long storm with clear skies finally visible on the horizon. The relatives came out of the woodwork like termites from a burning building. As news of my parents' arrest spread through the family grapevine, my phone became a confessional booth for decades of grievances I'd never known existed. Cousin Sarah called first, her voice shaking with years of suppressed anger. "Melody, I've been watching the news. I can't believe you finally exposed them. We need to talk, all of us cousins. There are things you need to know." The meeting took place at a restaurant downtown chosen for its privacy and distance from anyone's home. I arrived to find not just Sarah, but 6 other cousins I hadn't seen in years. The last time we'd all been together was grandmother Eleanor's funeral, a day I now understood had been carefully orchestrated to keep us from comparing notes. "Before we start," Sarah said, sliding a thick folder across the table, "we've been collecting evidence for years. We just never had the courage to use it." The folder contained a heartbreaking chronicle of systematic exploitation. Cousin Michael's college fund, $50,000 their grandfather left him, mysteriously vanished when he turned 18. My parents had been the trustees. "They told me Grandpa had bad investments," Michael said bitterly, "that the money was gone. I believed them. Took out student loans that I'm still paying off 15 years later." Cousin Jennifer's story was worse. When her mother died of cancer, she'd left a life insurance policy specifically for Jennifer's daughter's education. My parents volunteered to help manage the funds. $200,000, Jennifer whispered. Gone. They said the insurance company went bankrupt. I was grieving, overwhelmed with 2 kids. I didn't question it. My girls are working 3 jobs each to pay for community college. Each cousin had a similar tale. Trust funds vanished. Insurance payouts disappeared, inheritances evaporated. Always with my parents' fingerprints on the financial documents, always with elaborate explanations that we'd all been too trusting or too intimidated to challenge. The sick part, Sarah added, is how they'd flaunt their wealth afterward. Remember when they took that European cruise right after telling Michael his college fund was gone? Or the kitchen renovation that happened to cost exactly what Jennifer's insurance should have paid? I felt sick. How long have you all known? We started comparing notes about 5 years ago, Sarah explained. Created a private Facebook group to share information. But what could we do? It was our word against theirs, and they always had explanations. Legal-sounding excuses. Plus they were family. Michael finished. You don't take family to court. That's what we were taught, right? Family protects family even when family is robbing you blind. Uncle Robert, my father's younger brother, joined us later carrying his own box of evidence. He looked older than his 60 years worn down by secrets. "I've wanted to tell you this for decades," he began. "Your father destroyed our family business. Our dad left us equal shares in a construction company. Within 2 years of taking control, Robert had embezzled everything. Took out loans against the assets, funneled contracts to shell companies, bled it dry." "Why didn't you press charges?" I asked. He had dirt on me. Nothing illegal, but an affair that would have destroyed my marriage. He threatened to tell my wife unless I signed away my claims and kept quiet. I chose my family over justice. I've regretted it every day since. He pulled out old financial records contracts, bank statements showing the systematic destruction of a thriving business. The pattern is always the same. He identifies assets, gains control through trust or manipulation, then bleeds them dry while maintaining a legitimate front, like he did with my inheritance. Exactly. You're not his first victim, Melody. You're just the first one with the courage and resources to fight back. Jennifer's daughter, Emma, now 22, had been quietly documenting everything on her laptop. "I've created a timeline," she said, turning the screen toward me. "Based on everyone's stories, your parents have stolen approximately $3.7 million from family members over 30 years. The number staggered me. That doesn't even include what they took from me. Or what they scammed from non-family," Sarah added. "Remember Aunt Marie's best friend, Dorothy? She invested her retirement savings in one of your father's sure-thing real estate deals, lost everything, died in a state nursing home because she couldn't afford better." The stories kept coming. Each revelation painted a darker picture of the people who'd raised me. They weren't just thieves, they were predators who specifically targeted those who trusted them most. "Why are you all telling me this now?" I asked, overwhelmed by the avalanche of family secrets. "Because you've given us hope," Michael said simply. "When we saw the news, saw them in handcuffs, we realized justice was actually possible. We want to help your case. More importantly, we want our own justice." Uncle Robert had already consulted with lawyers. The statute of limitations has run out on most of our claims, but patterns of behavior matter in criminal cases. Showing 30 years of consistent fraud strengthens the prosecution's argument that this wasn't mismanagement, it was deliberate, calculated theft. "There's something else," Sarah said quietly, "about Nathan. Did you know he's done this before? Before Europe, I mean." I shook my head, bracing for another blow. 5 years ago, he convinced my elderly neighbor to invest in a revolutionary app he was developing. Took her for $80,000. When she realized it was a scam and threatened to call police, your parents paid her back out of their own pocket. Told everyone she was confused, possibly developing dementia. They covered for him. I said, the pattern becoming clearer. Enabled him, created the monster he became. "Created and funded," Uncle Robert confirmed. "Every failed scheme, every bad investment, every gambling debt, they cleaned up his messes with stolen money, usually ours." Emma had been researching while we talked. I found 12 business registrations under Nathan's name, all dissolved within months of formation, all with investor lawsuits that mysteriously got settled out of court. Mom and Dad's hush money, I realized, protecting their golden child with other people's futures. The meeting stretched long into the evening as more relatives arrived. Each brought evidence stories, documentation of theft and betrayal spanning decades. By the end, we had enough material to fill several boxes. "What do we do with all this?" Jennifer asked. "We take it to the FBI and district attorney." I said, decision crystallizing. Every document, every story, every pattern of behavior. Let them see the full scope of what my parents have done. "But some of us could face questions too," Michael pointed out. "Why we didn't report it earlier, why we stayed quiet." "Being a victim isn't a crime," Uncle Robert said firmly. "Being manipulated by family isn't illegal. Staying silent out of fear or shame isn't something we'll be prosecuted for. But staying silent now when we could help stop them, that would be complicity." We agreed to meet with prosecutors as a group, Strength in numbers, and more importantly, corroboration that would be impossible to dismiss as one disgruntled relative's vendetta. As we prepared to leave, Sarah pulled me aside. "I'm sorry we didn't protect you. We all knew your parents were toxic, saw how they treated you differently than Nathan. We should have said something sooner." "We were all victims," I replied, surprising myself with the lack of bitterness. They created a family culture of silence and complicity. Breaking that pattern now is what matters. The next morning, Richardson's eyes widened as I wheeled in boxes of new evidence. "This is extensive." 30 years of fraud, I confirmed, documented by 17 different victims, all family members who were too ashamed or scared to speak up before. He spent hours reviewing the material, occasionally whistling low at particularly damaging revelations. "This changes everything. We're not just talking about your inheritance anymore. This establishes a RICO pattern, racketeering, ongoing criminal enterprise. Federal charges on top of state charges." "What does that mean practically?" "It means your parents aren't looking at 20 years anymore. With RICO enhancements and multiple victims, we're talking potential life sentences. And Nathan becomes more than an accomplice. He's part of a criminal organization." Agent Santos arrived that afternoon to review the new evidence. Her excitement was palpable. "This connects dots we've been trying to draw for years. Some of these shell companies your father created. We've seen them in other investigations. He wasn't just stealing from family, he was providing financial services to other criminals. Money laundering. At minimum, possibly tax evasion for hire fraud consultation teaching other criminals how to hide assets. Your father was a one-man finishing school for financial crime." The implications kept expanding. What had started as inheritance theft was revealing itself as something far more sinister, a decades-long criminal enterprise that had destroyed dozens of lives while funding my parents' facade of respectability. That evening, I met Patricia at her house. She'd been quiet during dinner, clearly wrestling with something. "There's one more thing," she finally said. "Something I didn't tell you before because I wasn't sure it was my place, about your biological father, Marcus Webb." I tensed, prepared for another revelation that would shake my world. "He knew about you, sent money for years through intermediaries trying to provide for you without violating the agreement he'd made with Robert. Your college fund that mysteriously vanished. Half of it came from him. My biological father tried to provide for me, and my legal father stole it. The man who actually wanted you was prevented from helping by the man who saw you as an ATM," Patricia confirmed sadly. "Marcus even tried to establish contact when you turned 18, but Robert threatened to expose the affair, publicly ruin everyone's reputations. I thought about the layers of deception, the stolen opportunities, the loving biological father I'd never known because it would have interfered with my parents' grift. Is there anyone in my life who hasn't been lying to me?" The question came out more exhausted than bitter. Patricia took my hand. "Your grandmother, your cousins once they found their courage, me even if I waited too long to act, and most importantly, yourself. You never lied, never stole, never compromised your integrity, despite being raised by people who had none." "I could have become like Nathan," I said, the thought chilling. "They certainly tried to mold me into their image." "But you didn't. That's the miracle Melody. Surrounded by corruption, you stayed clean. Raised by thieves, you remained honest. That's not luck, that's character. Character that no amount of money could buy or steal." That night, I sat surrounded by evidence of my family's crimes testimony from dozens of victims, proof of multi-generational theft and betrayal. Tomorrow, we'd deliver it all to prosecutors, likely sealing my parents' fate and Nathan's future behind bars. But tonight I mourned not for the family I was losing, but for all the families they'd destroyed along the way. Every cousin struggling with debt, every elder who died in poverty, every dream deferred because the money meant for it lined my parents' pockets instead. Justice was coming, but it couldn't restore Michael's college years or Jennifer's daughter's stress-free education. It couldn't give Dorothy a dignified death or return the decades of family trust that had been weaponized against us. All justice could do was stop the bleeding, prevent future victims, and maybe let us all start healing from wounds we'd been taught to hide for far too long. The termites had finally been exposed. Now it was time to rebuild on foundation, stronger than family loyalty on truth, justice, and the courage to speak up, even when silence would be easier. My phone buzzed with a text from cousin Emma. "We're all behind you. Time to end their reign of theft. Family protects family, and that's exactly what we're doing, protecting each other from the ones who forgot what family means." She was right. We were redefining family, creating bonds based on truth, rather than blood support, rather than exploitation. And that family, the one we were choosing to build, was worth fighting for. I was organizing evidence files in Patricia's home office when a thick manila envelope caught my attention. It had arrived that morning by certified mail requiring signature. The return address was from Blue Cross Blue Shield's Special Investigations Unit. "Patricia," I called out, holding the envelope, "were you expecting anything from the insurance company?" She appeared in the doorway, reading glasses perched on her nose. "No, but that's interesting timing. Open it carefully, it might be relevant to the case." Inside, I found a letter that made my hands shake. "Dear Miss Hartley, our investigation has revealed you have been the victim of extensive healthcare fraud. Multiple claims have been filed in your name for treatments you never received. As the primary victim, you may be eligible for whistleblower compensation under the False Claims Act. Please contact our office immediately to discuss findings that include 47 fraudulent claims totaling $1.4 million, false diagnoses submitted by suspended medical providers, identity theft involving your Social Security number, potential criminal conspiracy involving your listed dependents. Time-sensitive response required within 10 days to preserve your rights." I sank into the nearest chair. "They used my identity for insurance fraud." Patricia read over my shoulder, her expression darkening. "This explains so much. Remember when your mother insisted you stay on their insurance plan even after you got your job? She said it was to save you money. She said family plans were cheaper, that it was foolish to pay for my own when theirs covered everything." The betrayal felt fresh, even after everything else. I was subsidizing their fraud. I called the investigator immediately. Martin Jeffries answered on the second ring, his voice carrying the weariness of someone who'd seen too much healthcare fraud. "Ms. Hartley, thank you for calling. I've been investigating your case for 18 months. Your parents have been running one of the most sophisticated healthcare fraud schemes I've encountered." Sophisticated how? They didn't just file false claims. They created an entire medical history for you, chronic conditions requiring expensive ongoing treatments. Fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue syndrome, severe anxiety disorder, clinical depression. According to our records, you've been receiving treatment 3 times a week for 5 years. I see a doctor maybe once a year for checkups. We know. That's what triggered our investigation. The registered addresses for treatments didn't match your residential history. You were supposedly receiving physical therapy in Arizona, while our employment records showed you working in Virginia. He walked me through the scheme. My parents had partnered with a network of corrupt medical providers, doctors who'd lost legitimate licenses, physical therapists operating from strip malls, even a psychiatrist who'd been dead for 2 years, but whose credentials were still being used to bill insurance. The beauty of their scam, Jeffries explained with grudging professional admiration, was the layering. Small claims, multiple providers, different conditions. Nothing that would trigger automatic audits. Death by 1,000 cuts rather than one massive fraud. How much did they steal? From insurance alone, $1.4 million over 5 years. But here's where it gets interesting. They were double and sometimes triple billing. Insurance would pay, then they'd submit the same claims to Medicare under your father's disability, then bill you directly for copays on treatments you never received. I pulled up my bank statement, suddenly understanding charges I'd questioned, but accepted. Monthly automatic payments for therapy copays. I thought it was for Dad's back treatments. Those payments went directly to accounts controlled by your parents. You were paying copays on your own fraudulent treatments. This is insane. How did doctors agree to this? Jeffries sighed. Desperate people do desperate things. Most of these providers had lost licenses for previous violations, prescription fraud, patient abuse, malpractice. Your parents offered them a way to keep practicing medicine illegally. Fake credentials, front companies, kickback schemes. He emailed me records while we talked. The screen filled with claim after claim treatments for conditions I'd never had at clinics I'd never visited. Physical therapy in Scottsdale, psychiatric treatment in Miami, pain management in Seattle. My fake medical self had been busier than my real self. The psychiatrist particularly interests us, Jeffries continued. Dr. Raymond Chen, deceased since 2019, but his credentials were used for your supposed twice-weekly therapy sessions. Those claims alone totaled $300,000. Wait, I said, recognizing the name. Chen. My mother always said we couldn't use that name because of a distant relative who disgraced the family. Dr. Chen lost his license for overprescribing opioids. Before he died, he was involved in several pill mills. We believe your parents had access to his credentials through those illegal operations. The implications hit me. Were they involved in drug trafficking? We can't prove direct involvement, but the connections are suspicious. Several prescriptions were written in your name for controlled substances. Did you ever receive unusual pharmacy calls or packages? Never. I don't even take aspirin regularly. Those prescriptions were filled and picked up by someone using your ID. We have pharmacy surveillance footage. Want to guess who appears in multiple videos? Nathan. Your brother collected enough opioids to supply a small town. Whether for personal use or distribution, we're still investigating. Patricia had been quietly taking notes. She looked up with a grim expression. This connects to something else. Remember when your mother was always at medical appointments? She'd be gone 3 days a week every week claiming various treatments. Her chronic illness that no doctor could diagnose. I said, the pieces clicking together. Jeffries confirmed our suspicion. Linda Hartley appears as both a patient and a beneficiary in multiple schemes. She was supposedly receiving treatments while simultaneously being the caregiver, collecting payment for your treatments, double dipping at its finest. What about my father's disability? Completely fabricated. We have video surveillance from multiple locations showing him engaging in activities impossible for someone with his claimed conditions. Golf tournaments, tennis matches, even helping load furniture. His Dr. Surprise is part of the same network of suspended providers. He sent more files. Photos of my father at country club events dated during periods when he was supposedly bedridden. Medical records showing treatments for a spinal condition that should have left him partially paralyzed, contrasted with images of him doing yard work. The disability payments alone constitute federal fraud, Jeffries explained. But using that fake disability to enhance insurance claims, that escalates everything. We're talking about organized crime, not simple fraud. What happens now? That's partly up to you. As the primary victim whose identity was stolen, you can file a qui tam lawsuit under the False Claims Act. Essentially, you sue on behalf of the government to recover fraudulent payments. You could receive up to 30% of what's recovered. 30% of $1.4 million, plus penalties and interest. The government typically triples damages in healthcare fraud cases. You could be looking at over $1 million in whistleblower compensation. Patricia whistled low. That's on top of recovering your inheritance. Separate matter entirely, Jeffries confirmed. This is compensation for exposing fraud that would have continued indefinitely without your cooperation. What do you need from me? Everything. Medical records, bank statements, correspondence with your parents about health issues. Anytime they mentioned your treatments or asked for health-related money. We're building a federal case and you're our star witness. I spent the next 3 hours on the phone with Jeffries and his team providing information and authorizations. Each revelation deepened the picture of systematic fraud that made their inheritance theft look almost amateur by comparison. "One more thing," Jeffries said as we wrapped up. "We've been coordinating with other agencies. Your parents are already facing state charges, but this brings in federal healthcare fraud, mail fraud, wire fraud, and identity theft, each carrying significant prison time." "How significant?" "Healthcare fraud alone can be 20 years per count. They're looking at hundreds of counts. Life in prison isn't hyperbole anymore, it's likely." After hanging up, I sat in stunned silence. Patricia made tea while I processed this new betrayal. They hadn't just stolen my money, they'd stolen my identity, my good health record, my clean insurance history. If I'd ever needed serious medical care, I might have been denied coverage because of their fraudulent claims. "You know what bothers me most?" I said, finally. "The planning this required. They had to consciously decide to commit fraud using their daughter's identity. That's not desperation, that's malice." "Greed," Patricia corrected gently. "Pure sociopathic greed. They saw you as a resource to exploit, not a daughter to protect." My phone rang Richardson calling with updates. I briefed him on the insurance investigation, and I could hear his sharp intake of breath. "This changes our entire strategy," he said. "Healthcare fraud at this scale with federal implications. Your parents just went from facing 20 years to facing forever. And the compensation available to you as a whistleblower, that's life-changing money on top of inheritance recovery." "It was never about the money," I said quietly. "It was about the truth." "I know. But the money helps you rebuild what they stole. Not just funds, but opportunities. You can go back to school, start a business, help other victims. Consider it justice with compound interest." That evening, as I organized medical fraud evidence to send to prosecutors, I found myself thinking about the sheer scope of my parents' crimes. Every aspect of their lives had been built on deception. Every relationship transactional, every interaction calculated for maximum exploitation. The parents who'd raised me were master criminals hiding behind suburban respectability. The mother who'd kissed my scraped knees had used my blood type to fake medical conditions. The father who'd taught me to ride a bike had claimed to be wheelchair-bound while cycling regularly himself. Nathan calling from jail had left another voicemail I didn't listen to but had transcribed, "Mel, the prescriptions weren't my idea. Mom and Dad made me pick them up. Said it was for legitimate pain management. How was I supposed to know I'm a victim too? Always the victim, never responsible." Even now, facing federal drug charges added to his financial crimes, Nathan couldn't admit his role. The golden child raised to believe consequences were for other people, now drowning in accountability he'd never learned to handle. But something Richardson said stuck with me. The money from whistleblowing and inheritance recovery wasn't just compensation, it was opportunity. Opportunity to help cousins still struggling with student loans from stolen college funds. Opportunity to support elder fraud victims like Dorothy's family. Opportunity to ensure no family member ever stayed silent about abuse for financial reasons again. My parents had spent decades destroying lives for profit. Maybe I could spend the next decades rebuilding them. The thought brought the first genuine smile I'd felt in weeks. Poetic justice at its finest, using the proceeds of exposing their crimes to heal the wounds they'd inflicted. I pulled out a notebook and started making lists. Cousin Michael's student loans, Jennifer's daughter's college tuition, a fund for family members afraid to speak up about exploitation, maybe even a foundation supporting healthcare fraud victims, ensuring others didn't suffer in silence like I almost had. My parents had taught me one valuable lesson through their negative example. Money was just a tool. They'd used it for destruction. I'd use it for restoration. The termites had been exposed, the damage cataloged. Now it was time to rebuild not just my own life, but all the lives they'd touched with their poisonous greed. And unlike their legacy of theft and lies, mine would be one of truth, justice, and genuine family support. The kind of family we all deserved, but had been denied by those who saw blood relations as just another opportunity for exploitation. The federal courthouse in downtown looked imposing even on a sunny Tuesday morning. I'd been called as a witness for Nathan's bail hearing, though Richardson advised I was under no obligation to help the brother who'd spent years living off my stolen inheritance. Still morbid curiosity won I needed to see what remained of the golden child my parents had created. Nathan entered in an orange jumpsuit shackled at wrists and ankles, his designer lifestyle replaced by federal detention reality. The man who'd swanned through European capitals on my grandmother's money now shuffled like the common criminal he'd always been. When our eyes met, his expression cycled through shame, anger, and finally settled on his default calculated manipulation. Agent Santos sat beside me in the gallery. He's been trying to make deals since the moment we arrested him, offering information on everyone except himself. Classic narcissist behavior. The prosecutor, a no-nonsense woman named Janet Morrison, laid out the charges: money laundering, wire fraud, identity theft, drug trafficking, conspiracy to commit international financial crimes. Each count carried decades in prison. Your Honor. Nathan's public defender argued, my client is a victim of family manipulation, raised by parents who taught him that crime was simply creative financing. He needs treatment, not incarceration. Morrison's response was swift. The defendant is 32 years old enough to know that creating shell companies to launder money for international criminals is illegal, old enough to understand that collecting prescriptions in his sister's name constitutes identity theft. This isn't youthful ignorance, it's calculated criminality. Then came the surprise witness. A young woman I didn't recognize took the stand, identified as Maria Constance, not Agent Santos's alter ego, but another woman entirely. Nathan's face went pale. State your relationship to the defendant, Morrison instructed. I was his fiancée, until I discovered he'd stolen my identity, maxed out credit cards in my name, and used my grandmother's death certificate to claim life insurance benefits. My stomach turned. Even knowing Nathan's nature, this shocked me. Maria continued, her voice steady despite visible emotion. Nathan told me he was a successful investment banker, said his family owned companies across Europe. I believed him until creditors started calling. $47,000 in debt I never accumulated. When did you discover the fraud? When I was denied a mortgage because my credit was destroyed. Nathan had been living a double life with me in Barcelona, with another woman in Prague, possibly others, each relationship funded by identity theft. The judge reviewed documents Maria had provided, forged signatures, fake companies, listing her as CEO loan applications she'd never seen. The scope of Nathan's personal fraud empire was staggering. There's more, Maria said quietly. I'm 3 months pregnant. When I told Nathan, he tried to convince me to claim the baby wasn't his, said his family situation was too complicated for a child. Now I understand he couldn't risk a DNA test exposing his other families. Other families, the judge leaned forward. Morrison presented evidence that made the courtroom gasp. Nathan had children in 3 countries, each mother told she was his only love, each relationship funded by fraud. Child support payments made with stolen money, promises of marriage backed by forged financial documents. The defendant has created a web of deception spanning continents, Morrison summarized. He's not just a flight risk, he's a ghost risk capable of disappearing into any of his false identities. Nathan's lawyer tried damage control. My client is willing to cooperate fully with authorities. He has information about larger criminal organizations, information he gained by actively participating in those organizations. Morrison interrupted. He's not a whistleblower. He's a co-conspirator trying to trade up. The judge called a recess. In the hallway, Maria approached me, tears streaming down her face. I'm sorry, she said. I know he's your brother, but people need to know what he is. He's not my brother, I said firmly. Brothers don't steal from family. Don't destroy lives for sport. Whatever DNA we share doesn't make us family. She showed me photos on her phone, Nathan, with different women in different cities playing the devoted boyfriend while building his house of cards. The man had inherited our parents' worst traits and amplified them into international criminality. The baby, Maria said quietly. I'm keeping it, despite everything. But I wanted to ask, will you help me understand his family's medical history? For the child's sake. There's a lot of mental illness, I said honestly. Narcissism, sociopathy, complete inability to feel genuine remorse. Your child will need watching for those traits. Agent Santos joined us. Ms. Constance's testimony is crucial, but there's more. Nathan's been busy in detention, making calls, sending messages through other inmates. We intercepted communications suggesting he has hidden assets your parents don't know about. Back in court, the evidence mounted. Nathan had skimmed from his parents' theft, creating his own secret accounts. While they funded his lifestyle, he'd been stockpiling stolen funds in cryptocurrency offshore accounts, hidden investments. Classic parasite behavior, the prosecutor explained. Feeding off the host while preparing for its eventual death. He knew your parents' scheme would eventually collapse, so he prepared his own escape route. Nathan's attorney made one last play. My client wishes to make a statement. Nathan stood his practiced charm flickering to life. Your Honor, I admit I made mistakes, but everything I did was because of how I was raised. My parents, Robert and Linda, taught me that family wealth was meant to be shared creatively. That traditional employment was for people without vision. I was a child shaped by criminals. How could I have known better? You could have known better, the judge said coldly, by observing your sister, raised in the same household, exposed to the same influences, yet she chose honesty. Your argument insults everyone who rises above difficult circumstances. Bail was denied. Nathan would remain in federal custody pending trial, facing potential life imprisonment for the scope of his crimes. As marshals prepared to lead him out, he caught my eye one last time. Melody, he called out. Tell them I'm sorry I never meant for it to go this far. I stood to leave without responding, but his next words stopped me. The Zurich account, November 15, 2019, Mom's maiden name. There's still time. Security moved to silence him, but the damage was done. He just revealed another hidden asset in open court, trying to bargain with stolen money until the very end. Even facing life in prison, Nathan couldn't stop scheming. In the parking garage, Agent Santos briefed me on their next steps. Swiss authorities were already cooperating, but that admission helps. We'll freeze any accounts connected to that date and name combination. How much money are we talking about? Based on his activities, millions. Your parents stole from family, but Nathan stole from criminals. That takes a special kind of stupid courage. Maria waited by my car, looking lost. I don't know what to do. Where to go? My family disowned me for dating outside our faith. I have nothing. I thought about cycles, how abuse created abusers, how victims became victimizers, how family patterns repeated unless someone chose differently. Maria's child would be born into a legacy of crime and deception just as I had been, but it didn't have to define them. There's a guest house on my friend Patricia's property, I heard myself saying. You could stay there until you're settled. The baby deserves a chance at normal, even if their father never had one. Maria's tears started fresh. Why would you help me? I was going to marry the man who stole from you. Because someone has to break the cycle. My grandmother tried with her will. Patricia tried by gathering evidence. Now it's my turn. That baby is my cousin regardless of Nathan's crimes. Family protects family the real way, not the twisted version I was taught. That evening, Patricia welcomed Maria warmly, immediately shifting into caretaker mode. Watching them prepare the guest house, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months, hope for the future, rather than anger at the past. Richardson called with updates. Nathan's admission in court was a gift. Swiss authorities found 4 accounts totaling $8.7 million, all traceable to money laundering operations. He wasn't just a participant, he was management. $8 million stolen on top of what my parents took. Your brother was playing in the major leagues while your parents thought he was in Little League. The full scope of his crimes is still being uncovered. Interpol is now involved. I sat on Patricia's porch that night processing the day's revelations. Nathan hadn't just followed in our parents' footsteps, he'd surpassed them. While they stole from family and insurance companies, he'd graduated to international crime syndicates and identity theft rings. Yet somewhere in Barcelona, Prague, and who knew where else children bore his DNA. Innocent lives who would grow up with the burden of their father's legacy, just as I had. The cycle threatened to continue unless someone intervened. I want to establish trust funds, I told Patricia, for Nathan's children, all of them, however many there are. Education money that can't be touched by anyone but them, administered by trustees who actually have integrity. That's generous considering. It's not generous, it's necessary. Those children didn't choose their father any more than I chose my parents. But maybe with education and opportunity, they can choose differently. Maria joined us on the porch wrapped in a blanket despite the warm evening. I listened to the news coverage. They're calling Nathan a mastermind. That's not who I knew. He was charming, funny, seemingly devoted. How did I miss it? Because he learned from experts, I said. My parents wore masks for 30 years. Nathan just perfected the technique. The man you loved was a character he played scripted for maximum manipulation. Don't blame yourself for believing a performance crafted by professionals. Will it ever stop hurting? Patricia answered before I could. The sharp pain fades. The disappointment lingers but transforms. Eventually, you'll be grateful you discovered the truth before wasting more years on lies. Truth hurts, but it's a clean pain. Deception is a poison that kills slowly. We sat in companionable silence, 3 women brought together by one family's web of lies. Tomorrow would bring more revelations, more legal proceedings, more untangling of Nathan's international deceptions. But tonight we were building something new. Not the family Nathan had collected through fraud and abandonment, but a chosen family based on truth and mutual support. Maria would have her baby here surrounded by people who understood the weight of toxic legacy but refused to let it define the future. Nathan would spend decades in prison, his children would grow up without him, and somewhere my parents would learn their golden child had betrayed them just as they'd betrayed everyone else. The irony wasn't lost on me. They'd created Nathan in their image, and he'd exceeded their wildest expectations. The protege had surpassed the masters, leaving destruction across continents instead of just counties. But every criminal empire eventually falls, and from those ashes, with enough courage and support, something better could grow, something honest, something real, something worth being family for. The text arrived on a Thursday morning, sent from my mother's lawyer's phone. Your parents request a family meeting to discuss resolution. Olive Garden on Maple Street, 2 p.m. Saturday. They promise to apologize and make things right. Please consider attending for closure. Richardson advised against it immediately. It's a trap. They're desperate, and desperate people do dangerous things. But something in me needed to see them one last time, to look them in the eyes knowing everything I now knew, to hear what possible explanation they could offer for decades of theft and betrayal. I'll go, I decided, but not alone, and not without protection. Saturday arrived gray and drizzling, fitting weather for what promised to be a disaster. I entered the restaurant with Patricia beside me and Richardson waiting in his car outside, ready to document anything that happened. Agent Santos had wanted to provide security, but I'd refused. This needed to be family only, or what was left of it. My parents sat in a corner booth, and I almost didn't recognize them. The months since their arrest had aged them dramatically. My father's golf tan had faded to prison pallor, his expensive clothes replaced by an ill-fitting suit that screamed, "Public Defender's Suggestion." My mother looked smaller, her perfectly styled hair now gray at the roots, her designer facade crumbling like everything else they'd built on lies. But it was the third person at their table that made me stop short. A man I didn't recognize, mid-40s with an expensive suit and the kind of aggressive confidence that marked him as either a salesman or a criminal. Sometimes both. Melody. My mother stood reaching out as if to hug me before Patricia's stern look stopped her. "Thank you for coming. This is Mr. Harrison, our new financial advisor." "I thought you were broke," I said, not bothering with pleasantries as I slid into the booth across from them. "That's what we need to discuss," my father said, his usual commanding tone replaced by something almost pleading. "There's been a misunderstanding about our assets. Mr. Harrison has found some irregularities in the prosecution's case." Harrison smiled, all teeth and no warmth. "Ms. Hartley, I specialize in asset recovery and financial rehabilitation. Your parents have hired me to help resolve this unfortunate family dispute." "This isn't a dispute," I said flatly. "It's a criminal prosecution. They stole millions." "Allegedly," Harrison corrected, "and that's where things get interesting. You see, I've reviewed the financial records and there's significant evidence that you've been hiding assets yourself. Offshore accounts, cryptocurrency holdings, suspicious transfers, all very concerning." I actually laughed. "Are you seriously trying to flip this on me? I worked 60-hour weeks while they spent my inheritance. What offshore accounts could I possibly have?" Harrison pulled out a folder with the theatrical flair of someone used to intimidation tactics. "These documents suggest otherwise. Bank records showing transfers to accounts in your name in the Cayman Islands, cryptocurrency wallets receiving funds from questionable sources, even connections to Nathan's European operations." Patricia leaned forward, examining the papers with her accountant's eye. "These are forgeries. Good ones, but forgeries. The account numbers don't match international banking standards. The dates correspond to when Melody was working documented overtime shifts. This is amateur hour." "Amateur or not," my father interjected, his mask finally slipping to reveal the calculating criminal beneath mud sticks. "How would your employer react to investigations into your finances? How would your reputation survive even unfounded allegations?" "Ah," I said, understanding dawning. "Extortion. You're attempting to blackmail me with fabricated evidence. Did you really think this would work?" My mother's tears started then, but they looked rehearsed. "We just want our family back together. Why are you being so cruel? We made mistakes. Yes, but sending us to prison. Your own parents. The parents who stole my inheritance, who sabotaged my education, who committed identity theft and healthcare fraud using my name, those parents. We were trying to protect you." She raised her voice, drawing stares from nearby diners. "You don't understand the pressure we were under, the debts, the obligations, the country club memberships, the European vacations, the luxury cars." I pulled out my phone showing photos Richardson had provided of their purchases over the years. Which of these were survival necessities? Harrison tried to regain control. "Let's focus on solutions. Your parents are willing to admit to mismanaging some funds. In exchange for dropping criminal charges, they'll agree to a payment plan, small monthly amounts that won't impact their retirement." "Their retirement funded by my stolen inheritance. Or," Harrison's voice turned harder, "we proceed with our countersuit. Financial abuse of elderly parents, harassment, defamation. Your parents' connections in this community run deep. Judges, prosecutors, business leaders who've known them for decades. Do you really want to test their influence?" Patricia snorted. "Their influence? You mean the country club that expelled them, the church that banned them, the business partners currently testifying against them? That influence—" "We still have friends," my father said darkly. "People who owe us favors. People who understand that sometimes children turn against their parents out of greed." "Like Nathan turned against you?" I asked quietly. The silence that followed was deafening. My parents exchanged glances and Harrison shifted uncomfortably. "What do you mean?" My mother's voice was barely a whisper. "You don't know Nathan's been stealing from you for years, skimming from your theft to fund his own criminal empire. The student who surpassed the teachers. He has millions hidden in accounts you never knew existed." "You're lying," my father said, but uncertainty flickered in his eyes. "Zurich account, November 15th, 2019, your maiden name, Mom. He announced it in federal court. $8.7 million he stole while you were stealing for him. The son you created in your image perfected your techniques." My mother's rehearsed tears became real. "That's impossible. Nathan would never would steal from family lie to people who loved him. Use trust as a weapon. I wonder where he learned those values." Harrison stood abruptly. "This meeting is over. My clients attempted reconciliation in good faith. Your refusal will be noted in court." "Good faith?" I stood too, Patricia beside me. "You mean this attempted extortion? The forged documents, the threats about mysterious connections. Please do note it in court. In fact," I pulled out my phone, ending the recording I'd started the moment we sat down. "Everything's been recorded. Legal in this state as long as one party knows. That would be me." Harrison's face went pale. My parents looked between us, realization dawning that their final gambit had failed spectacularly. "You recorded us?" My mother's shock seemed genuine for the first time all afternoon. "I learned from the best," I said. "Document everything, trust. No one family means nothing when money's involved. Aren't those the values you taught me?" My father's mask finally shattered completely. "You sanctimonious little—" He caught himself aware of other diners and the recording. "We gave you everything. Fed you, clothed you, put a roof over your head. With my grandmother's money. Let's be very clear, you gave me nothing that wasn't already mine. You stole my inheritance and used a fraction of it to meet your legal obligations as parents. That's not generosity. That's embezzlement with extra steps." "Mr. Harrison," Patricia addressed the lawyer, "I assume you have a license you'd like to keep. Participating in extortion and fraud would endanger that. You might want to reconsider your client list." Harrison grabbed his briefcase and fled without another word, leaving my parents alone in their corner booth, looking smaller and older than I'd ever seen them. "Is it true," my mother asked quietly, "about Nathan, the millions?" "Every word. While you thought you were controlling him with money, he was building his own criminal network. The protege surpassed you in every way. International crime instead of local. Millions instead of thousands. He even stole from the criminals he worked with, something you were never brave or stupid enough to attempt." "We need that money," my father said desperately. "For lawyers, for survival. You have to help us recover it." The audacity stunned even me. Help you. Help you recover money that Nathan stole from his criminal enterprises, funded by money you stole from me. "You're still our daughter," my mother pleaded. "That has to mean something." "It does mean something. It means I spent 28 years believing love was conditional on compliance. It means I nearly destroyed my health working to support your lies. It means I'll need therapy for decades to undo the damage you called parenting." I turned to leave, but my father's next words stopped me cold. "Your biological father wanted to abort you. We saved your life. You owe us everything." Patricia gasped. Even the nearby diners who'd been pretending not to eavesdrop went silent. I turned back slowly. Marcus Webb wanted to take responsibility. You threatened to destroy his medical career unless he paid you to disappear. I have the letters, the bank records, the proof. You sold access to me like I was property. So yes, I owe you something, the justice you've earned. You'll regret this," my father said, his voice low and venomous. "When you're alone with your money and your righteousness, you'll regret losing your family. I lost my family the day you chose greed over love. I'm just making it official." As we walked out, leaving them in their booth, surrounded by cold breadsticks and shattered manipulation, my mother called out one last time, "Melody, please, we're sorry." I didn't turn around. Some apologies come too late, weighted with too much theft and deception to ever balance the scales. In the parking lot, Richardson was already on the phone with prosecutors. Yes, recorded extortion attempts and harassment. New charges to add to the pile. How did I do? I asked, suddenly exhausted. Like someone who's found their strength, Patricia said proudly. They threw everything at you. Guilt threats, fake evidence, emotional manipulation, and you didn't bend. Harrison's going to have a bad week, Richardson added with satisfaction. The Bar Association frowns on lawyers who participate in extortion schemes. Your parents just lost their last competent defender. That evening, safe in Patricia's living room, I listened to the recording again. Every threat, every manipulation tactic, every desperate attempt to regain control. It was like listening to strangers. These couldn't be the people who'd raised me, who'd attended my school plays and birthday parties. But of course they were. They'd always been these people. I'd just been too young, too trusting, too desperate for their love to see it. Maria joined us, her pregnancy now showing. I heard about the meeting. Are you okay? I'm free, I said, surprised to find it was true. For the first time in my life, I'm completely free of them. What happens now? Richardson had the timeline memorized. Arraignment next week for the new charges. Trial in 4 months for the main fraud case. With today's evidence, we're looking at additional counts of conspiracy extortion and witness intimidation. Your parents just added years to their eventual sentences. And Nathan, still trying to make deals from federal detention, offering information on everyone except himself. The prosecutors aren't buying what he's selling anymore. I thought about the family meeting disaster, how it had revealed the final truth. They weren't capable of remorse, only regret at being caught. Every apology came with conditions, every admission with deflection. But their biggest miscalculation was thinking I was still the compliant daughter who'd handed over her paycheck without question. That girl had died the day I discovered the inheritance theft. In her place stood someone forged by truth and strengthened by justice. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number, probably another flying monkey sent by my parents to guilt or threaten me. But when I opened it, I found something unexpected. Ms. Hartley, my name is Jennifer Walsh. I'm Nathan's daughter from Dublin. I'm 17 and just learned who my father really is. Could we talk? I need to know if I'm destined to become like him. Another victim of my family's poison reaching out for hope. Another chance to break the cycle. I showed the message to Patricia and Maria. Looks like we might need a bigger guest house. Or a better family, Maria suggested. The kind that helps instead of hurts. I typed my response to Jennifer. You're not destined to become anyone but yourself. And yes, we should talk. You have family here who understands. Real family. The disaster of a meeting had tried to pull me back into old patterns of guilt and obligation. Instead, it had freed me to build something new, a family based on choice, rather than chromosomes honesty, rather than manipulation support, rather than exploitation. My parents could keep their threats and schemes. I had something more valuable, the truth and the courage to live it. The safety deposit box felt heavier than its small size, suggested weighted with 8 years of secrets. Patricia had kept the key hidden since my grandmother's death, waiting for the moment I'd be strong enough to handle whatever truths lay inside. That moment had finally come. Your grandmother made me promise, Patricia explained as we sat in the private viewing room at First National Bank. She said I'd know when you were ready, when you'd broken free enough to understand. Inside the box, carefully wrapped in tissue paper, lay a stack of letters, photographs, and documents that would rewrite everything I thought I knew about my family history. The first letter, dated just weeks before her death, was addressed to me in my grandmother Eleanor's distinctive handwriting. My dearest Melody. I read aloud, my voice catching on the familiar endearment. If you're reading this, then Patricia has deemed you ready for the complete truth. By now you've discovered the theft, the lies, perhaps even the depth of your parents' greed. But there's more. So much more that I couldn't tell you while alive, bound as I was by promises and blackmail. Your father isn't just a thief, sweet girl. He's been one since childhood. His first victim was his own father, my husband Charles. The construction business Robert claims he inherited Charles built it from nothing, only to watch his son systematically destroy it through embezzlement. When Charles confronted him, Robert let him die. I was there that night. Charles was having chest pains, begging Robert to call an ambulance. Your father sat in his chair counting money he'd stolen from the company safe and watched his father die. Problem solved, he said afterward, as if Charles had been nothing more than an inconvenient obstacle. I wanted to go to the police, but Robert had planned for that. He'd forged documents making it look like Charles was the embezzler, like the stolen funds were hidden gambling debts. If I spoke up, Robert promised to destroy his father's reputation, posthumously. I stayed silent to protect Charles's memory, and I've regretted it every day since. I had to stop reading, my hands shaking. Patricia squeezed my shoulder, her own eyes wet with unshed tears. There's more, she said quietly. Keep going. The next section revealed my mother's entry into the family. Linda appeared like a vulture scenting carrion. She recognized a kindred spirit in Robert, someone who saw relationships as transactions, family as resources to be mined. Their wedding was a merger of two criminal minds, not a marriage. Together they refined their techniques. Linda brought healthcare fraud expertise from her previous life. Oh yes, she had a first husband who mysteriously died after signing over his life insurance. Robert provided the business structures to hide their theft. They were perfect for each other in the worst possible way. When you were born, I hoped parenthood might change them. I watched for signs of genuine love, of protective instinct, of anything resembling normal parental bonds. Instead, I saw calculation. You were an investment to them, future caregiver, eventual income source, living organ bank if needed. The way they looked at you chilled me to my bones. Photographs spilled out as I reached for the next letter. Images I'd never seen my grandfather Charles, vibrant and healthy, just days before his death. My parents' wedding, where even then their smiles looked like predators who'd successfully cornered prey. But one photo stopped me cold. My grandmother holding an infant me with a man I didn't recognize standing beside her. Tall, distinguished, with kind eyes that looked familiar somehow. That's Marcus Webb, Patricia said softly. Your biological father. He came to see you exactly once when you were 3 weeks old. Your grandmother arranged it secretly. The next letter explained. Marcus loved you, Melody. Despite what Robert told you, despite the lies about him wanting you terminated, Marcus fought for you. He offered to marry Linda, to raise you properly, to give you the life you deserved. But Linda had already set her sights on Robert's inheritance potential. She used her pregnancy to force a payoff, then married Robert for his access to family money. Marcus sent money for 18 years through intermediaries I helped arrange. Every birthday, every Christmas checks would arrive that I'd deposit into a hidden account for your future. Robert discovered it when you turned 18 and stole every penny. $400,000 your biological father had saved for you gone. I confronted Robert, threatened to expose everything. That's when he played his final card. He had photos of Patricia's son, your cousin Daniel, in a compromising situation. Nothing illegal, but enough to destroy Daniel's military career if released. He'd been collecting blackmail material on the entire family for years, preparing for eventual rebellion. Patricia wiped her eyes. Daniel. He died in Afghanistan 2 years later. Never knew his career was saved by Eleanor's silence. More documents emerged, bank records showing the systematic theft, medical files revealing my parents had been testing my tissue compatibility with theirs since childhood, even a private investigator's report tracking their various schemes across state lines. But here's what they never found. The letter continued. The real inheritance. Not just money, though there's plenty hidden where Robert's greed can't reach. The real inheritance is knowledge and the power it brings. Attached are affidavits from witnesses to Robert's crimes spanning 40 years, signed statements about Charles's death, Linda's first husband's suspicious demise, financial fraud dating to Robert's teenage years. I've spent my final years building an airtight case, waiting for someone strong enough to use it. That someone is you, Melody. You have your biological father's integrity and your grandfather Charles's strength. You have something Robert and Linda never possessed: a conscience. Use these documents to stop them permanently, not for revenge, but for justice, for all their victims who can't speak for themselves. The second trust Patricia mentioned, it's not just money, it's a foundation. The Eleanor Sanders Foundation for Fraud Victims, fully funded, legally established, waiting for someone with the courage to activate it and help others escape what you've endured. Your parents will paint me as bitter, senile, vindictive. Let them. The evidence speaks louder than their lies ever could. I'm gone now, beyond their reach, finally free to tell the truth through you. I love you, my darling girl. I'm sorry I couldn't protect you better in life, but perhaps these tools will help you protect yourself and others in death. All my love, Grandma Eleanor. The silence in the room felt sacred. I spread the evidence across the table: photos, affidavits, reports, medical records, financial documents, 40 years of crimes meticulously documented by a woman who'd been forced to watch evil flourish in her own family. The medical compatibility testing, I said, voice hollow. They were preparing to harvest my organs if needed. Patricia nodded grimly. Your blood type matches both of theirs perfectly. Bone marrow, kidney, liver, you were their insurance policy. Eleanor found the medical orders in Robert's files. And my grandfather's death. Eleanor had a recording. She'd started documenting everything after Charles grew suspicious. The tape is in a separate safety deposit box, along with other evidence that could be considered illegally obtained. She kept it all separate to protect the legal case. Richardson would need to see everything immediately. The statute of limitations had run out on some crimes, but murder had no expiration date. If we could prove my father had willfully let his own father die... There's one more letter, Patricia said, gently pulling out a smaller envelope. This one's different. My name was written in a different hand, masculine, careful, somehow familiar. My dear daughter, it began, and I knew immediately who'd written it. By the time you read this, I'll likely be gone. Cancer runs in the Webb family, ironic for a doctor who spent his life fighting it. I'm writing this knowing I'll never have the chance to say these words in person, thanks to the devils who raised you. I want you to know that not a day passed without thoughts of you. I have a box of unsent letters, birthday cards never mailed, graduation congratulations never delivered. Your mother, Linda, made it clear that any contact would result in your destruction. She convinced me that staying away was the only way to protect you. I was a coward. I let money substitute for presence checks, replace hugs, financial support stand in for the father you deserved. I told myself it was noble sacrifice, but really I was afraid. Afraid of Robert's threats, afraid of Linda's vindictiveness, afraid of disrupting whatever happiness you might have found. Eleanor sent me photos when she could. I watched you grow from afar, saw you graduate high school with honors despite their sabotage, saw you working yourself to exhaustion to support their greed, saw you becoming the remarkable woman I always knew you'd be. The truth about your conception isn't pretty. Linda targeted me specifically: wealthy doctor, married but vulnerable, foolish enough to believe her lies about leaving an abusive relationship. When she revealed her pregnancy, I offered everything. Divorce. My wife, marry her, raise you properly. She laughed and named her price. $1 million to disappear, or she'd claim assault, destroy my career, ensure I never practiced medicine again. I paid. God help me, I paid to lose you. Then watched her marry Robert 6 months later and claim you were premature. Watched them raise you on stolen money while painting me as the villain who wanted you gone. Your grandmother, Eleanor, was my only connection to you. She shared what she could told me about your kindness, your intelligence, your unbreakable spirit despite their worst efforts. When she told me about their theft, their plans for you, I wanted to intervene. But I was already dying, and what could a ghost offer against living monsters? So I offer this instead: the truth. You were conceived in deception, but you were loved from the first moment I knew of you. Every choice I made, wrong as they were, came from love and the desperate desire to protect you from the people I'd inadvertently delivered you to. Don't let their poison define you. You are not their lies or my cowardice. You are your own person with your own worth that no amount of money can measure. The inheritance I left through Eleanor is just money. The real gift is your freedom from their influence. Live well, my daughter. Love freely. Trust carefully but completely when you find those worthy of it. Build the family you deserved but never had. And know that somewhere beyond this life, a flawed man who failed as your father loves you still. Forever your devoted Marcus Webb. I sat in that bank room surrounded by evidence of multi-generational crime, holding a letter from the father I'd never known, and felt something fundamental shift inside me. The last piece of the puzzle had fallen into place, revealing a picture more horrible and more hopeful than I'd imagined. He loved me, I whispered, clutching the letter. Everyone who truly knew you loved you, Patricia said firmly. Your grandmother, Marcus, me, even some of your cousins, who were too scared to show it. The only people incapable of love were the ones who claimed it most loudly while picking your pockets. What do I do with all this? What Eleanor knew you would. What Marcus hoped you might. You use it to end their reign of terror permanently. Then you build something better on the ashes. That evening, Richardson's entire legal team assembled to review the new evidence. The excitement in the room was palpable, as lawyers who'd thought they had an airtight case realized they now had something unprecedented. Murder charges for Charles's death. Richardson listed pacing excitedly. Additional fraud going back decades. Blackmail, extortion, organ harvesting conspiracy. This is a RICO case on steroids. Your parents aren't looking at 20 years anymore. They're looking at life without parole. And the foundation? I asked. Ready to activate the moment, you say. $20 million in funding, all from legitimate sources Eleanor carefully documented. You could help hundreds of fraud victims rebuild their lives. I thought about all the cousins struggling with debt from stolen college funds, the elderly victims who died in poverty after trusting my parents, Jennifer Walsh, Nathan's daughter, wondering if crime was her genetic destiny, Maria and her unborn child starting over after Nathan's betrayal. Activate it, I decided, but with one change: the Eleanor Sanders Foundation for Family Fraud Victims. Let's be specific about the betrayal we're addressing. That night, I sat in Patricia's guest room reading and rereading my father's letters, both the biological one who'd loved imperfectly from afar and the legal one who'd seen me as nothing but a resource to exploit. Nature versus nurture, genetics versus environment. I'd been shaped by both Marcus's conscience warring with Robert's influence, Eleanor's strength fighting Linda's manipulation. But in the end, neither defined me. I was Melody Sanders. I'd legally changed it that day. Granddaughter of Eleanor, daughter of Marcus, survivor of Robert and Linda's greed. I was building a foundation on the wreckage of family crime, turning blood money into hope for other victims. My phone buzzed with a message from Jennifer Walsh. Landed in Boston. Thank you for the plane ticket. Thank you for believing I can be different. Thank you for showing me family can mean something other than exploitation. Another broken bird finding her way to our makeshift nest, another chance to redefine what family meant. I pulled out my laptop and began typing the press release that would accompany the new evidence filing. The world needed to know the full scope of Robert and Linda's crimes. More importantly, their victims needed to know justice was finally coming. Local family's 40-year crime spree, exposed by granddaughter's courage. I typed, then deleted it. Too sensational. Foundation established to help family fraud victims rebuild. I tried again, better, focused on healing rather than harm. As I wrote, I felt my grandmother's presence not ghostly or mystical, just the weight of her love and planning finally bearing fruit. She'd played the long game gathering evidence for decades, waiting for the moment her granddaughter would be strong enough to use it. That moment had come. The final secrets were revealed. The last of their power over me had crumbled with the truth. Tomorrow the world would learn what Eleanor had always known, that Robert and Linda weren't just thieves, but murderers, that their crime spree had lasted longer and cut deeper than anyone imagined. But tonight I sat with my chosen family, Patricia Maria, and soon Jennifer, and felt something my biological parents had never given me: peace. The peace that comes from truth, acknowledged justice pursued, and love freely given, without price tags attached. The grandmother's secret had set me free. Now it was time to free everyone else still trapped in my family's web of lies. The call from Channel 9 News came on a Tuesday morning, 3 days after we'd filed the new evidence with the court. Sarah Chen, their senior investigative reporter, had been following the case since my parents' arrest. Now, with murder charges added to their expanding list of crimes, she wanted an exclusive interview. "Your story has captured national attention," Sarah explained over the phone. "Financial fraud is one thing, but matricide organ harvesting, conspiracies, 4 decades of family exploitation. This is unprecedented. People need to hear from you directly." Richardson initially opposed the idea. "You don't owe the public anything. Let the evidence speak for itself." But I thought about all the silent victims still out there, afraid to speak up about their own family exploitation. If my story could give even one person courage to seek help, the discomfort would be worth it. "I'll do it," I decided. But live, no editing that could twist my words. The studio felt smaller than it looked on television cameras, and lights creating an intimate circle around 2 chairs. Sarah had prepared thoroughly her questions, written on cards she'd shared with me beforehand. No ambushes, just truth. Tonight we have an exclusive interview with Melody Sanders, the woman whose courage exposed one of the most extensive family fraud operations in American history. Sarah began after the introductions. "Melody, thank you for joining us." "Thank you for giving me this platform," I replied, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. "Let's start at the beginning. When did you first realize something was wrong with your family's finances?" I thought back to all the red flags I'd ignored or rationalized. Looking back, there were signs throughout my childhood. College funds that mysteriously vanished, relatives who stopped visiting after financial disagreements, the constant emergencies that only money could solve. But the real awakening came when I questioned a $5,000 emergency charge after they'd just spent $8,000 the month before. That led to you cutting them off financially. Yes. What I didn't know then was that I was cutting off more than just my credit card. I was severing their access to millions in stolen inheritance, fraudulent insurance claims, and money they'd taken from dozens of family members over 4 decades. Sarah leaned forward. "The murder charge has shocked everyone. Can you tell us about your grandfather?" I'd prepared for this question, but it still hurt to answer. Charles Sanders built a successful construction company from nothing. According to the evidence my grandmother secretly compiled, my father systemically embezzled from that company while Charles was alive. When my grandfather confronted him, my father watched him have a heart attack and refused to call for help. He let his own father die to avoid exposure. Your grandmother knew this. She witnessed it. But my father had already prepared blackmail material on other family members. She stayed silent to protect them while secretly documenting everything. It took 8 years after her death for the truth to come out. Through you. Through me, with help from my Aunt Patricia, and eventually dozens of other family victims who found their courage when they saw my parents in handcuffs. Sarah pulled up a graphic showing the scope of the crimes. 47 family members defrauded, 3.7 million stolen just from relatives, insurance fraud exceeding $1 million. Can you help our viewers understand how they got away with it for so long? They weaponized family loyalty, I explained. In our family, you didn't take relatives to court. You didn't air dirty laundry. You protected the family name even when family was destroying you. They counted on shame and silence to protect their crimes. What about Nathan, your adopted brother? Nathan learned from the masters and exceeded them. While my parents stole locally, he went international. While they targeted family, he targeted everyone. He's currently facing life in prison for money laundering, identity theft, and connections to human trafficking organizations. There have been accusations that you're being vindictive, that this is about inheritance rather than justice. How do you respond? I'd expected this. My parents had been spreading their narrative through whatever channels remained available to them. I discovered recently that my grandmother left me a separate trust my parents never found. I'm already wealthy, independent of recovering what they stole. This isn't about money, it's about stopping predators who happen to share my DNA. Speaking of DNA, the revelation about your biological father has added another layer to this story. Marcus Webb was a good man who made one mistake trusting my mother. She targeted him specifically for his wealth, then extorted him when she became pregnant. He spent 18 years trying to provide for me from a distance, while my parents stole every penny he sent. Sarah's expression softened. He died before you could meet him. But he left me letters, evidence of his love and his regret. That's more than my legal parents ever gave me besides trauma and debt. Let's talk about the foundation you've established. The Eleanor Sanders Foundation for Family Fraud Victims. We provide legal resources, counseling, and financial support for people exploited by their own relatives. In our first week, we've received over 300 applications for help. That many. Family financial abuse is more common than people realize. It's just hidden by shame and misplaced loyalty. We're trying to break that silence. The interview had been going smoothly until Sarah checked her phone during a commercial break. Her expression shifted to concern. Melody, we're going to go off script here. Your mother is on our call-in line claiming she has information that will change everything. Our producers have verified it's really her. Are you willing to take the call? My stomach dropped, but I nodded. This was live television showing fear would only give her power. Linda Hartley. Sarah announced as the call connected. You're on with your daughter. She's not my daughter. My mother's voice crackled through the speakers, sharp with venom. A daughter doesn't destroy her family for money. Mrs. Hartley. Sarah interjected. You're currently facing life in prison for murder, fraud, and conspiracy. Are you sure you want to make statements on live television? I want the world to know the truth about Melody, about how she planned this for years, about the secret recordings she made as a teenager, about the journal where she fantasized about our deaths and inheriting everything. I almost laughed at the desperation. Mom, I was working 2 jobs as a teenager to help pay your fake bills. When would I have had time to plan your downfall? You were always calculating, always watching, just like your biological father, cold, unnatural. We tried to raise you right, but bad blood will tell. Mrs. Hartley. Sarah interrupted. Are you admitting to the charges against you? I'm admitting we made mistakes trying to manage an ungrateful daughter's inheritance, but murder organ harvesting. These are fantasies created by a vindictive child who resented Nathan getting attention. So you deny letting your father-in-law die? Robert's father was old and sick. His death was natural no matter what lies Eleanor told. That woman hated me from day one, poisoned Melody against us. This whole thing is Eleanor's revenge from beyond the grave. I found my voice. Mom, there's a recording. Grandma recorded Dad admitting what he did. The prosecutors have it. Your lies won't work anymore. Silence on the line. Then a sound I'd never heard before, my mother laughing. Not her practiced social laugh or her manipulative tears through laughter combination. This was unhinged, bitter final. You stupid girl. You think you've won? You've lost everything. Family, heritage, identity, you'll die alone with your money just like Eleanor, just like Marcus. The Sanders curse all that wealth, no one to love you for anything but your bank account. I'd rather be alone with integrity than surrounded by thieves pretending to love me. Thieves, we're your parents, we gave you life. No, I said firmly. Marcus and Linda gave me life. You and Robert gave me trauma. There's a difference. The line went dead. My mother had hung up, but the damage was done, or so she thought. Sarah turned back to me, professional concern evident. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine. That was actually helpful. She just admitted on live television to mismanaging my inheritance. Her lawyer is probably having a heart attack right now." "One final question," Sarah said as our time wound down. "What would you say to other people trapped in similar situations with their families?" I looked directly into the camera, thinking of all the silent victims watching. Document everything. Find allies. There are always other family members who know the truth but are too scared to speak. Don't let misplaced loyalty keep you funding someone else's crimes. And remember, DNA doesn't make family. Love, respect, and honesty make family. If your relatives don't provide those, they're just genetic strangers who happen to know your childhood nicknames. Melody Sanders, thank you for your courage in sharing this story. As the cameras shut off and studio lights dimmed, Sarah shook my hand warmly. That was powerful. Your mother's call, especially, she just gave prosecutors gift-wrapped evidence. She always did have more ego than sense, I admitted. My phone exploded with messages as I left the studio. Richardson was ecstatic about my mother's admissions. Patricia proud of my composure. Cousins grateful for the public validation of their experiences. But the most meaningful message came from a number I didn't recognize. "Ms. Sanders, I just watched your interview. I'm 73 years old and my son has been draining my retirement while telling me it's for his children's medical bills. His children are healthy, I know, because I see them. Your courage has given me strength. Tomorrow, I'm calling a lawyer. Thank you for showing me it's not too late to fight back. Dorothy Kim." One person. If the interview had helped just one person, the public exposure was worth it. That evening, the story went viral. Family fraud survivor began trending. My inbox filled with stories from around the world, adult children exploited by parents, elderly parents, drained by adult children, siblings stealing from siblings. The scope of family financial abuse was staggering, but so was the courage of victims finally speaking up. Maria, now heavily pregnant, watched the replay with Patricia and me. "Your mother sounded completely unhinged," she observed, like she couldn't believe her manipulation wasn't working. "Narcissists often break when their victim supply is cut off," Patricia explained. "Linda just experienced narcissistic collapse on national television. The mask didn't just slip, it shattered." The foundation's website crashed from traffic. Volunteers worked through the night to restore service and process the flood of applications for help. By morning, we'd received donations totaling $2 million from viewers moved by the story. "We'll need a bigger office," Patricia noted, scrolling through offers of pro bono legal help from firms across the country. "Maybe a full-time staff. We'll need therapists, too," I added, reading heartbreaking stories from victims. Legal help is just the first step. People need counseling to understand they didn't cause this, didn't deserve it. The next morning brought unexpected consequences. 3 of my parents' former victims, elderly people they'd scammed over the years, came forward publicly. The district attorney announced additional charges. The FBI revealed connections between my father's shell companies and larger criminal networks. "Your interview broke the dam," Richardson explained during our morning briefing. "Victims who were ashamed are now angry. Criminals who felt protected by family silence are scrambling. You've started something bigger than just your own case." But the best moment came that afternoon. Jennifer Walsh. Nathan's daughter from Dublin arrived at Patricia's house, looking nervous but determined. She'd watched the interview from the airport, waiting for her connecting flight. "I saw you on the news," she said shyly. "You looked so strong, not like someone who'd been hurt, but like someone who'd healed. Is that possible? Can people like us actually heal from people like them?" I hugged her, this stranger who shared my burden of criminal DNA and broken trust. Not only is it possible, it's inevitable if we choose it. Healing isn't about forgetting what they did. It's about not letting it define what we become. That night, as our makeshift family gathered for dinner, Patricia, Maria, Jennifer, and several cousins who'd started visiting regularly, I thought about my mother's curse. that I'd die alone, unloved, just another wealthy Sanders, isolated by money. Looking around the table at faces united by shared pain but bonded by chosen love, I realized how wrong she was. I hadn't lost family by exposing crimes, I'd gained it by choosing truth. Every person at this table had rejected comfortable lies for difficult honesty. That made us more family than blood ever could. The public revelation had stripped away the last of my parents' power. No more secrets to expose, no more shame to weaponize. Just truth, bright and cleansing as disinfectant, killing the bacteria of family fraud one story at a time. My phone buzzed with another message from a viewer ready to confront their own family exploitation. Another crack in the wall of silence that protected predators with shared DNA. The revolution hadn't started with handcuffs or legal documents. It had started with a single word, no. No more money, no more enabling, no more silence. Now that revolution was spreading one brave victim at a time. The courthouse steps were packed with media when we arrived for the first day of trial. What had started as a family dispute over inheritance had exploded into one of the most watched criminal cases in the state's history. Court TV had requested cameras in the courtroom. Publishers wanted book rights. Hollywood producers circled like well-dressed vultures. But I kept my focus on what mattered: justice for 40 years of victims. Inside the courtroom filled quickly. The left side held a small army of prosecutors, FBI agents, and boxes of evidence that required multiple carts. The right side looked sparse. My parents with their public defenders, isolated and diminished. They'd aged another decade in the months since arrest. My father's commanding presence had shriveled to defensive hunching. My mother's perfect facade had crumbled entirely, leaving someone I barely recognized. Orange jumpsuits had a way of stripping away pretense. All rise for the Honorable Judge Patricia Blackwood presiding. Judge Blackwood commanded the room, immediately a small woman with sharp eyes that missed nothing. She'd built her career prosecuting financial crimes before ascending to the bench. My parents couldn't have drawn a worse judge for their case. We're here for case number 2025 CF-847 State versus Robert and Linda Hartley. Charges include first-degree murder, aggravated theft exceeding $5 million, insurance fraud, tax evasion, identity theft, and 37 additional counts of financial crimes spanning 40 years. Lead prosecutor Janet Morrison stood. Your Honor, the state will show that the defendants orchestrated a 4-decade criminal enterprise that destroyed dozens of lives, culminated in murder, and would have continued indefinitely without the courage of their daughter, Melody Sanders, in exposing their crimes. Objection. My father's lawyer protested weakly. Prejudicial characterization. Overruled. Proceed, Ms. Morrison. The prosecution's opening statement was devastating. Morrison laid out the timeline with surgical precision, from my grandfather's death, through decades of family exploitation, to the recent attempts at witness intimidation. She painted my parents as calculating predators who viewed even their own child as a resource to exploit. The evidence will show, Morrison continued, that Robert Hartley watched his father die rather than risk exposure of his embezzlement, that Linda Hartley has been running insurance scams since before she met Robert, that together they created a criminal partnership that viewed family members not as loved ones to protect, but as victims to exploit. Their own daughter was tissue-typed at birth, not for her health, but as a potential organ donor. Ladies and gentlemen, these are not parents who made mistakes. These are criminals who happened to have children. The defense's opening was painful to watch. My father's lawyer, an overwhelmed public defender named Carl Hutchins, tried to paint them as misunderstood money managers who'd made poor decisions under pressure. The defense will show that Robert and Linda Hartley, while perhaps guilty of financial mismanagement, were trying to preserve family wealth for future generations. What the prosecution calls theft, we call complicated family finances. What they call murder, we call a tragic but natural death of an elderly man with heart disease. Even Hutchins didn't seem to believe his own words. The prosecution's first witness was Aunt Patricia. She took the stand with 8 boxes of evidence she'd compiled over decades, each document tagged and organized with her accountant's precision. Ms. Sullivan. Morrison began, "How long have you been documenting your brother's financial crimes?" 23 years, Patricia answered clearly, "since he stole my son Daniel's college fund and tried to blame it on bad investments." "Objection," Hutchins called. "Relevance." "Your Honor." Morrison responded, "Establishing pattern of behavior is crucial to proving ongoing criminal enterprise." "I'll allow it. Continue." Patricia walked the jury through decades of family gatherings that were actually hunting expeditions, how my parents would identify vulnerable relatives, elderly aunts, grieving widows, young adults with inheritances, and systematically separate them from their money. "They had a system," Patricia explained. "Linda would provide the emotional manipulation, the tears, and health crises. Robert would offer to help manage the money. Within months, accounts would be emptied, and victims would be too ashamed to complain." "How many victims did you identify?" 47 family members that I can document. Probably more who never came forward." The defense's cross-examination only made things worse. Every question Hutchins asked opened doors for Patricia to provide more damaging details. By the time she stepped down, several jurors were visibly disgusted. The next witness changed everything. Eleanor's estate lawyer, Frederick Hammond, who'd been forced into hiding by my father's threats, but had emerged when he learned of the arrests. "Mr. Hammond," Morrison asked, "why didn't you report the irregularities in Eleanor Sanders' estate when she died?" "Robert Hartley made it clear that if I tried, he'd destroy my practice. He had photos manufactured, but convincing, that suggested I'd been embezzling from clients. He said he'd release them unless I stayed quiet about the missing funds." "So you allowed the theft to continue?" "To my eternal shame, yes. But I also documented everything, hoping someday someone would be brave enough to use it." He gestured to me. That day finally came. Hammond's evidence was damning. Secret recordings of my father threatening him, bank records showing systematic looting of the estate, even emails where my parents discussed how to keep me from discovering the theft until they could drain the accounts completely. On day 3, the medical evidence emerged. Dr. Sarah Chen, no relation to the reporter, testified about the insurance fraud, her voice clinical, but clearly appalled. The defendants filed claims for over 200 procedures that never occurred. They created an entire false medical history for their daughter, chronic conditions. She doesn't have treatments, she never received surgeries that never happened. They even claimed she'd had a kidney removed and sold the supposed medical debt to collection agencies. "I still have both kidneys," I muttered to Richardson, who squeezed my hand. "The most disturbing part," Dr. Chen continued, "was the tissue typing. Medical records show Melody was tested for organ compatibility with both parents at age 3, 7, 12, and 16. No medical reason existed for these tests. The only logical conclusion is they were assessing her value as a potential donor." My mother broke her courtroom silence, then sobbing loudly. "We just wanted to be prepared in case of emergency." Judge Blackwood's gavel cracked. "The defendant will remain silent unless testifying." The prosecution saved their most powerful evidence for day 4, the recording of my grandfather's death. Eleanor had hidden it in a separate safety deposit box with instructions for it to be released only if criminal charges were filed. The courtroom fell silent as we heard Charles Sanders' voice, weak but clear. "Robert, please. Call 911. My chest. I can't breathe." Then my father's voice, cold and calculating. "You should have minded your own business, old man. A few more minutes and your interference ends permanently." "You're killing me." "No, your heart is killing you. I'm just choosing not to interfere with nature. Big difference, legally speaking." The recording continued for 12 agonizing minutes. Charles begging. Robert counting money from the safe he'd just emptied. The old man's breathing becoming more labored. Then silence. "Finally," my father's voice concluded. "Now to call the ambulance and play the grieving son." Several jurors were crying. One had to be excused to compose herself. My mother stared at my father like she was seeing him for the first time. The defense barely tried to cross-examine the authenticity of the recording. What could they say? The voice analysis had confirmed it was Robert. The timeline matched perfectly with the reported death. The safe mentioned had been found empty despite Charles's meticulous records, showing it should have contained $100,000. On day 5, I took the stand. Morrison had prepared me well, but facing my parents while testifying felt like walking through emotional quicksand. "Ms. Sanders, tell us about the night you discovered your inheritance had been stolen." I walked the jury through that horrible evening at Patricia's house, the dawning realization that my entire life had been built on lies, the discovery that my exhaustion, my poverty, my missed opportunities all had been orchestrated by the people who claimed to love me most. How did that make you feel? Like I'd been hollowed out. Everything I thought I knew about myself, my family, my failures, all of it was fabrication. They didn't just steal money. They stole my identity, my education, my future, and tried to convince me it was my fault for not being good enough. Yet you survived, thrived even. How I had examples of real love. My grandmother, who protected me even from beyond death. My Aunt Patricia, who risked everything to gather evidence. My biological father, who sent support even though he couldn't send himself. I learned that DNA doesn't make someone family. Choice does. I chose to reject their poison and seek justice instead. The cross-examination was brutal. Hutchins, desperate for any foothold, attacked my character, my motives, my mental state. "Isn't it true you were always jealous of Nathan?" I envied the love my parents showed him. I didn't know then it was purchased with stolen money. "You cut them off financially without warning." I ended my enabling of their criminal enterprise. That's not cruelty, that's sanity. "You're enjoying this revenge, aren't you?" "No, I'm grieving. Grieving the parents I thought I had, the childhood I deserved, the family that should have been. But grief doesn't mean I should allow their crimes to continue." When Hutchins finally finished, Morrison had one redirect question. "Ms. Sanders, if you could have your inheritance back but had to allow your parents to continue their crimes, would you?" "Never. The money means nothing compared to stopping them from creating more victims. This isn't about what I lost, it's about preventing others from losing too." The defense's case was pitiful. They called character witnesses who crumbled under cross-examination, admitting they'd also been scammed by my parents. They tried to introduce doubt about the recording's authenticity until the prosecution's expert demolished their claims. They even put my mother on the stand, a desperate move that backfired spectacularly. Mrs. Hartley, her own lawyer, asked gently, "Did you know about your husband's activities regarding his father's death?" My mother's mask finally cracked completely. I knew Robert was hard, practical, but murder. "No, I thought Charles just died. Old men die, it happens." But Morrison's cross-examination revealed the truth. Email after email where my mother discussed spending the money from Charles's safe, plans to claim his life insurance before the body was cold, even jokes about how convenient his death had been for their finances. "You knew," Morrison stated flatly. "You may not have been in the room, but you knew Robert killed his father, and you helped him profit from it." "I want a deal," my mother suddenly screamed. "I'll tell you everything about Robert, about the others, about where the money's hidden. Just please, I can't go to prison. I'm not like him." The courtroom erupted. Judge Blackwood hammered for order while my father turned to stare at his wife with pure hatred. "You stupid woman," he snarled before his lawyer could stop him. "You think they'll save you? You're as deep in this as I am." "I was just following your lead. You threatened me too. Said you'd kill me like you killed Charles if I didn't comply." Judge Blackwood cleared the court, but the damage was done. In trying to save herself, my mother had confirmed every prosecution claim and added new ones. The jury deliberated for exactly 93 minutes, barely enough time to elect a foreman and vote on the dozens of charges. On the charge of murder in the first degree, we find Robert Hartley guilty. On the charge of conspiracy to commit murder, we find Linda Hartley guilty. The litany continued through all 47 charges, guilty on every single count. Judge Blackwood didn't hide her satisfaction. Robert and Linda Hartley, you have been found guilty of crimes that shock the conscience. You turned family into a hunting ground. You murdered for money. You viewed your own child as spare parts. In my 20 years on the bench, I have never encountered defendants more deserving of the maximum sentence. Robert Hartley, you are sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for murder, plus 280 years for financial crimes to be served consecutively. Linda Hartley, you are sentenced to 45 years for conspiracy to commit murder and 120 years for financial crimes to be served consecutively. My father laughed, actually laughed. You think you've won, he called out to me. You're still my daughter. My blood runs in your veins. You'll become just like us eventually. It's nature, not nurture. No, I said, standing to face him one last time. I'm nothing like you. I'm Eleanor's granddaughter, Marcus's daughter, Patricia's niece. I'm the collection of everyone who loved me despite your efforts to isolate me. Your blood means nothing. Your influence is over. You're just another criminal heading to prison, and I'm just another survivor moving on with her life. The marshals led them away, my mother sobbing, my father still ranting about blood and destiny and inheritance. The courtroom slowly emptied until only the prosecution team, Patricia, and I remained. How do you feel? Morrison asked gently. Free, I answered honestly. For the first time in my life, completely free. Outside, the media waited for statements. Richardson handled most of it, but I stepped to the microphones for one message. Today, justice was served for 40 years of victims. But this isn't the end, it's the beginning. The Eleanor Sanders Foundation will continue helping families trapped in cycles of financial abuse. No one should suffer in silence because their abuser shares their DNA. Thank you to everyone who supported us. Thank you to the jury for seeing the truth. And thank you to my grandmother who made this day possible by believing justice would eventually come. That evening, our extended chosen family gathered at Patricia's house. Cousins who'd testified Maria with her newborn son Jennifer, who'd watched the trial every day, and dozens of others connected by shared survival rather than blood. To Eleanor. Patricia raised her glass. Who knew that truth planted deep enough would eventually bloom? To Eleanor, we echoed. The verdict couldn't restore stolen years or resurrect dead dreams. It couldn't give Michael his college experience or Dorothy her dignified retirement. But it could do something almost as valuable, prove that family criminals weren't untouchable, that DNA wasn't destiny, and that sometimes, against all odds, justice actually prevailed. The courtroom victory was complete. Now came the harder task, building lives worth living on the ashes of what they'd tried to destroy. The conference room at Richardson & Associates had transformed into my unofficial headquarters. 6 months after the verdict, with my parents beginning their life sentences and Nathan's trial approaching, I could finally focus on building rather than battling. The foundation has received over 3,000 applications. Patricia reported spreading documents across the table. We've helped 400 families so far, but the need is overwhelming. And our resources, I asked, reviewing financial projections. Between the whistleblower rewards, recovered inheritance, and donations, we have $42 million in assets. But at our current burn rate, that gives us maybe 5 years of operation. It wasn't enough. The foundation needed sustainable income, not just a trust fund that would eventually deplete. That's when Sandra, my former boss, entered with a proposal that would change everything. I've been thinking. She began, her business instincts as sharp as ever. Financial abuse thrives in darkness. What if we could shine light on it systematically? She laid out her vision, a technology company that would detect and prevent financial exploitation, AI-powered monitoring for unusual account activity, secure communication channels for victims, educational resources delivered through an app, corporate partnerships with banks and financial institutions. We call it Guardian Angel Technologies, Sandra continued. The foundation provides the mission. The company provides sustainable funding through B2B contracts. You help victims while creating tools to prevent future abuse. You want me to run a tech company? I laughed. I'm an accountant who just survived a family crime syndicate. Exactly. You understand both the financial mechanisms and the emotional manipulation. No MBA could replicate your expertise through lived experience. Maria, now working as our foundation's victim advocate while raising her son, added her perspective. The calls we get, people don't just need money. They need validation tools, proof they're not crazy. Technology could scale what we're doing one-on-one. Over the following weeks, the idea took shape. Richardson's firm offered pro bono legal structure. Tech entrepreneurs who'd followed the trial volunteered expertise. Even some of the jurors reached out wanting to support the mission that had opened their eyes to family financial abuse. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source, the FBI. Agent Santos, now heading a financial crimes task force, approached with a partnership proposal. "We need what you're building," she explained. "Family financial abuse is often the gateway to larger crimes. Nathan started by stealing from relatives before graduating to international money laundering. If we could identify patterns early..." "You want our data? We want partnership. Anonymous pattern sharing that protects victims while identifying serial abusers. Your foundation helps individuals. Our task force stops criminal networks. Together, we prevent future Robert and Linda Hartleys." Within 3 months, Guardian Angel Technologies incorporated with a unique structure, 51% owned by the Eleanor Sanders Foundation, ensuring profits would always serve the mission. Sandra as CEO, bringing business acumen. Me as president, providing subject matter expertise. Patricia as CFO, because I'd never trust finances to anyone else. Our first product launched quietly, a secure app where users could document financial interactions with family members, upload a text demanding money. The AI would analyze manipulation patterns, suspicious wire transfer requests, automated alerts and education about common scams, feeling gaslit about family finances, connect with counselors who understood financial abuse dynamics. The response exceeded our wildest projections. 10,000 downloads in the first week, 50,000 by month's end. Banking partners lined up wanting to integrate our detection algorithms. Insurance companies saw the value in preventing fraud before claims were filed. But success brought unexpected challenges. A lawsuit arrived from an organization calling itself Families First Federation, which investigation revealed was funded by several convicted financial abusers, trying to suppress tools that would expose their methods. "They're scared," Richardson observed with satisfaction. "Criminals rely on shadows. You're installing floodlights." The legal attack backfired spectacularly. Media coverage of the lawsuit brought massive attention to our work. Downloads spiked to 500,000. Major tech investors approached smelling both profit and purpose. The most surreal moment came when Jennifer Walsh, Nathan's daughter, presented her own innovation during our weekly team meeting. She'd been quietly learning to code while living with Patricia, channeling her fear of inherited criminality into creation. I call it Truth Tracker. She explained, demonstrating a blockchain-based system for creating immutable financial records. Abusers often gaslight victims about money, claiming loans were gifts, denying agreements, rewriting history. This creates undeniable proof. "You built this?" I asked, amazed at her transformation from scared teenager to confident developer. "I needed to prove I was nothing like him," she said quietly. Building tools to stop people like my father felt like the ultimate rebellion. We integrated Truth Tracker into our platform. Users could now create tamper-proof records of family financial agreements. No more he said, she said about loans or gifts. No more rewriting history when convenient. Corporate partnerships accelerated our growth. Banks integrated our APIs to flag suspicious family-related transfers. Elder care facilities used our tools to protect residents from exploitative relatives. Even law firms adopted our documentation systems for family financial disputes. Year 1 ended with Guardian Angel Technologies, valued at $200 million. The foundation had helped 2,000 families recover assets or escape abuse. We'd employed 50 people, many of them survivors, who understood our mission viscerally. The irony wasn't lost on me. My parents had stolen millions to build their facade of success. I was building actual success to help victims of people like them. They'd seen family as a resource to exploit. I'd turned family exploitation into a resource for healing. But the universe wasn't done with poetic justice. Nathan's trial began just as our company hit unicorn status, $1 billion valuation in under 18 months. The same week he was convicted on all charges. Forbes ran a cover story, From Victim to Victor, how Melody Sanders built a $1 billion empire on the ashes of family fraud. Nathan watched from federal prison as the sister he'd mocked for working legitimate jobs became everything he'd pretended to be, successful, wealthy, internationally recognized. But while his success had been built on lies and theft, mine was built on truth and service. His final attempt at relevance came through a jailhouse interview where he claimed credit for inspiring the foundation. If I hadn't shown Melody how vulnerable families were to financial exploitation, she never would have started her company. In a way, I'm a co-founder. Our legal team shut that down quickly, but I responded publicly. Nathan's right about one thing. He taught me valuable lessons. He showed me how predators think, how they operate, how they justify their crimes. That knowledge helps us protect victims. So thank you, Nathan, for being such a comprehensive example of what not to be. The foundation's work expanded beyond individual assistance. We funded research into financial abuse patterns. We lobbied for legislation making family financial exploitation a specific crime with enhanced penalties. We created certification programs for financial advisors to recognize and report suspected abuse. Michael, my cousin, whose college fund had been stolen, joined as head of education initiatives. "I never got my traditional degree," he said during his hiring interview, "but I got a PhD in survival. Let me teach others what we learned the hard way." His first project was revolutionary financial literacy programs specifically designed for abuse survivors. Not just how to balance checkbooks, but how to recognize manipulation, set boundaries, and rebuild after exploitation. Maria evolved into our chief storytelling officer, sharing survivor narratives that humanize the statistics. Her son, now toddling around our offices, became an unofficial mascot representing the future we were building, where children wouldn't be seen as ATMs by their parents. The company's success attracted attention from unexpected quarters. Tech giants wanted to acquire us. Venture capitalists offered astronomical valuations. But maintaining majority foundation ownership meant staying true to our mission over maximizing profits. "We're not for sale," I announced at a packed press conference. "Guardian Angel Technologies exists to serve a purpose, not line pockets. We'll partner with anyone who shares our mission, but we'll never compromise our commitment to survivors." The statement cost us some investors, but attracted others who understood that purpose-driven companies could be wildly profitable while doing good. Our Series C funding round raised $300 million at a $3 billion valuation, with impact investors leading the way. But the moment that meant the most came during a quiet afternoon in Patricia's garden. She handed me a letter, old, yellowed, sealed with wax. "Eleanor left instructions to give you this when the foundation helped its 1,000th family. We hit that milestone yesterday." My grandmother's final letter was short but profound. "My dearest Melody, if you're reading this, then you've done what I always knew you would, transformed our family's poison into medicine for others. The money I left was just seeds. What you've grown from it is the real inheritance. Your grandfather Charles would be so proud. He built his company to support family. You've built yours to protect families from those who would exploit them. That's justice beyond what any courtroom could provide. Remember, empires built on lies always fall, but what's built on truth and service that endures forever. All my love, Grandma Eleanor." I sat in that garden letter in hand, surrounded by the family I'd chosen and the business I'd built, and felt the cycle complete itself. My parents had taught me that family meant exploitation. My grandmother had shown me it could mean protection. Now I was teaching thousands that it could mean whatever they chose it to mean. Guardian Angel Technologies wasn't just a business success, it was proof that trauma could be transformed, that victims could become victors, that the very knowledge meant to destroy us could be repurposed to defend others. The business phoenix had risen from the ashes of family fraud, and its wings spread wide enough to shelter anyone who needed protection from those who confused blood with ownership. My parents had spent decades destroying lives for modest millions. In 18 months, I'd built $1 billion company dedicated to protecting those lives. They'd stolen from dozens. We'd helped thousands. They'd hidden in shadows. We operated in radical transparency. The best revenge truly was massive success, but success measured not just in dollars, but in lives protected, families healed, and cycles broken. Every notification of another victim helped was worth more than any valuation. Every story of escape and recovery added to our real bottom-line proof that love could triumph over greed, that chosen family could heal what blood family had broken. The phoenix was flying, and it would never stop rising. 1 year later, the ballroom of the Ritz-Carlton gleamed with purpose rather than pretense. Crystal chandeliers illuminated not another hollow charity gala, but the first anniversary celebration of Guardian Angel Technologies and the Eleanor Sanders Foundation. 500 survivors, advocates, employees, and supporters gathered to mark what we'd built from the ashes of family betrayal. I stood at the podium looking out at faces I'd come to cherish more than any blood relation. Patricia sat at the head table, her silver hair styled elegantly pride, radiating from every line of her face. Sandra, our CEO, reviewed notes for her speech about our expanding international operations. Maria bounced her son Thomas on her knee, the child who'd never know his father, but would never lack for family. 1 year ago, I began my voice carrying clearly through the room. We launched with a simple mission to protect families from financial predators, especially those who share their DNA. Tonight I can announce we've helped over 10,000 families recover more than $200 million in stolen assets. Applause thundered through the room, but I raised my hand for quiet. This moment deserved more than statistics. But numbers only tell part of the story. The real victory is in this room. Jennifer Walsh, who transformed from a frightened teenager to our lead developer, proving daily that we are not our parents' crimes. Michael Chen, whose stolen college fund led him to create educational programs that have reached 50,000 survivors. Every person here who chose truth over comfortable lies, who refused to let abuse define their future. At a corner table, my cousins clustered together, the same relatives who'd once been too scared to speak up, now serving as regional foundation directors. Uncle Robert had become our senior advisor on elder financial abuse, his experience with my father's blackmail making him uniquely qualified to spot manipulation tactics. The surprise guest made everyone gasp. Judge Patricia Blackwood, who'd presided over my parents' trial, approached the stage. In retirement, she'd become one of our fiercest advocates. "I've sentenced hundreds of financial criminals," she said, taking the microphone. "But I've never seen victims transform their pain into such powerful purpose. The Sanders Foundation isn't just helping individuals, it's changing how society views family financial abuse. No longer can predators hide behind family matters while destroying lives." As dinner was served, I moved between tables, no longer the exhausted woman who discovered her inheritance theft, but someone who'd found strength in shared survival. At every stop, another story of transformation. A grandmother who discovered her son's theft in time to save her retirement. A young man who documented his parents' fraud using our app, securing evidence that led to their conviction. A support group leader who'd helped 30 victims in rural Alabama, where family loyalty ran deep and silence deeper. Melody, A familiar voice called out. Dorothy Kim, the woman who'd messaged me after my television interview, approached with tears in her eyes. I wanted to thank you in person. I got my money back. More importantly, I got my voice back. My son is in therapy now, learning why he felt entitled to steal from his mother. There's hope for healing. These moments, these connections between survivors, meant more than any business success. We'd created not just a company or foundation, but a movement that redefined family itself. The evening's program included surprise announcements. Sandra unveiled Guardian Angel 2.0, featuring AI that could predict financial abuse patterns before they escalated. The FBI partnership had expanded to include Interpol, creating a global database of financial predator tactics. 3 major banks were integrating our technology as standard fraud protection. But the announcement that brought me to tears came from Patricia. The Eleanor Sanders Foundation is establishing a university scholarship program, full rides for survivors of family financial abuse, because the education stolen from many of us stops with our generation. Jennifer Walsh was the first recipient accepted to MIT's computer science program. Michael would finally get his degree 20 years late, but fully funded. Dozens of other survivors would reclaim educational dreams that theft had deferred. As the formal program concluded, I found myself in the garden terrace with those who'd become my true family: Maria, Patricia, Sandra, Jennifer, and others who'd walked through fire and emerged not burned, but forged into something stronger. Your parents are watching this on the news in prison, Patricia mentioned quietly. I wonder what they think. I hope they understand, I said, surprising myself with the lack of bitterness. They spent 40 years building a criminal empire that crumbled in months. We built something legal and lasting in a single year. They confused fear with respect, theft with success. We proved that real power comes from lifting others, not pushing them down. My phone buzzed with a message that made me smile. Thomas Richardson, my attorney-turned-fiancé, was running late from prosecuting another family fraud case. Save me cake. Putting another predator away. Love you. Our relationship had evolved slowly from professional respect to personal connection. He'd seen me at my lowest, helped me fight for justice, then stood beside me as I built something beautiful from the wreckage. Next month, we'd marry in Patricia's garden, a small ceremony for chosen family only. A toast. Sandra proposed raising her champagne. To Eleanor Sanders, who planted seeds of justice in secret. To Melody, who had the courage to water them with truth. To every survivor who chose healing over hiding. And to the families we're creating, not perfect, but honest. To chosen family, we echoed glasses chiming like bells of freedom. The party continued inside, but I lingered on the terrace looking up at stars my grandmother once wished upon. So much had changed since that awful Sunday dinner, when I'd discovered the depth of betrayal. The girl who'd apologized for existing had become a woman who'd built an empire of empowerment. My mother's prison letters had evolved from threats to bargaining to desperate pleas for forgiveness. I'd stopped reading them months ago. Forgiveness might come someday, but it wasn't required for my healing. They'd made their choices. I'd made mine. The consequences were simply playing out as justice demanded. Nathan's latest scheme from federal prison, trying to sell his story as a cautionary tale, had been shut down by Son of Sam laws preventing criminals from profiting from their crimes. His children, scattered across continents, were slowly finding each other through our foundation. Jennifer had become their unofficial big sister, proving daily that DNA wasn't destiny. "There you are," Thomas said, wrapping his arms around me from behind. "Sorry I'm late, but you'll appreciate this. The couple we prosecuted today tried to claim they were inspired by your parents' methods, studied the trial transcripts like a how-to manual. Did it work? They're looking at 30 years because they didn't realize we've gotten very good at recognizing the patterns. Your foundation's research helps secure the conviction. Every criminal who tries to copycat your parents just proves how valuable your work is." We stood together watching the city lights twinkle below. Somewhere in federal prison, my parents existed in the consequences of their choices. Somewhere across the globe, Nathan's victims were rebuilding with our help. And here, in this moment, surrounded by love that expected nothing but gave everything, I was home. The Foundation's motto, emblazoned on banners throughout the ballroom, captured what we'd learned. Family isn't blood, it's choice, commitment, and care. My biological parents had given me DNA and trauma. My chosen family had given me healing and purpose. The trade-off hadn't been equal, it had been magnificently in my favor. As we rejoined the celebration, I caught sight of myself in a mirror. The woman reflected back looked nothing like the exhausted girl who'd worked 2 jobs to fund her parents' lies. This woman stood tall, dressed not in designer clothes bought with stolen money, but in simple elegance purchased with earned success. Her eyes held strength instead of fear, wisdom instead of confusion, love instead of obligation. "Ready for your closing speech?" Sandra asked. I nodded, returning to the podium for final words that had been building for a year. Someone recently asked what message I'd send to families dealing with financial abuse. Here it is. You deserve love that doesn't come with a price tag. You deserve support that doesn't require suffering. You deserve family that builds you up instead of breaking you down for parts. If your blood family can't provide that, build your own. Find your people among survivors and supporters. Create bonds based on mutual respect rather than manipulation. Choose connections that nourish rather than drain. The family that tried to destroy me made me believe I was worthless. The family I chose showed me my worth was infinite and non-negotiable. That's the transformation available to every person brave enough to say no more to abuse and yes to healing. Guardian Angel Technologies will continue growing, protecting families worldwide. The Eleanor Sanders Foundation will keep fighting for survivors. But our greatest success won't be measured in dollars saved or predators caught. It will be measured in lives reclaimed, in cycles broken in children who grow up knowing that love shouldn't hurt and family shouldn't steal. To those still trapped, help exists. You're not crazy. You're not alone. You're not obligated to fund someone else's life at the expense of your own. To those who've escaped, your story matters. Your healing inspires others. Your choice to rebuild proves that survival is possible and thriving is achievable. And to those who think blood entitles them to exploit family, your time is ending. Technology is exposing your tactics. Law enforcement is recognizing your patterns. Society is rejecting your justifications. The shadows where you operate are disappearing. Thank you all for proving that families can be sanctuaries instead of crime scenes. Together, we're rewriting the definition of kinship itself. The standing ovation lasted 5 minutes, but the real triumph was in the hundreds of faces beaming back at me, survivors who'd become thrivers, victims, who'd become victors, individuals who'd become a movement. Later, as the evening wound down and the ballroom slowly emptied, I found myself back in the garden with my core circle. Thomas held my hand while Patricia regaled Jennifer with stories of my grandmother's subtle rebellions. Maria taught her son to say, "family," and his tiny voice wrapping around the word felt like prophecy. "What's next?" Sandra asked, already thinking 3 moves ahead. "Global expansion, legislative change, maybe a documentary to reach those still suffering in silence." I paused, then smiled. "But tonight we just celebrate how far we've come." My phone buzzed with one final message of the evening, a notification from our app. Another family had just been helped, another cycle broken, another survivor starting their journey toward healing. The ripples of our work spreading ever outward, touching lives we'd never meet but would forever impact. The true family I'd found wasn't perfect. Patricia still worried too much. Sandra occasionally pushed too hard. Maria sometimes retreated into protective silence. Jennifer fought daily battles against inherited shame. But we showed up for each other without price tags, supported without scorekeeping, loved without conditions. My parents had asked, "What did we get for raising you?" The answer was simple, exactly what they'd earned. Prison sentences for crimes, isolation born from betrayal, legacy of cautionary tales. But the question they should have asked was different. What did we miss by seeing our daughter as a resource instead of a person? They missed this, the joy of watching someone you love succeed, the pride of contributing to another's growth, the wealth that comes from connections rather than collections, the immortality found in positive impact rather than stolen assets. They missed the chance to be part of something beautiful instead of architects of something ugly. They missed love that multiplies when shared rather than diminishes when spent. They missed family, real family, the kind worth choosing, worth building, worth protecting. But I hadn't missed it. I'd found it in courtrooms and boardrooms, in late-night strategy sessions, and tearful support groups in every survivor who'd reached out and every advocate who'd stood up. Blood had made me vulnerable to predators. Choice had made me powerful enough to stop them. And love, the real kind, the kind that gives without calculating returns, had made me wealthy beyond any inheritance. The card had stopped working because I'd started working on myself. What they'd lost wasn't just money, it was their daughter. But what I'd found was priceless. My worth, my voice, my purpose, and my people. The family I'd built from the ashes of the one that burned me was more than worth the fire I'd walked through to find them, and together we'd make sure others could find their way through the flames too, into the clear, honest light of chosen love and earned trust. This was my inheritance, my legacy, my true family fortune, the unbreakable bonds forged by shared survival and mutual support. No one could steal it, counterfeit it, or claim it wasn't earned. It was mine, theirs, ours forever. If this story resonated with you, if you've experienced family financial abuse or know someone who has, I want to hear from you. Share your thoughts in the comments below. How did you find the strength to break free? What would you tell someone still trapped in these situations? Please like this video if it touched your heart and subscribe to our channel for more stories of survival justice and triumph over family exploitation. Share this with anyone who needs to hear that they're not alone, that family abuse isn't normal, and that freedom is possible. Thank you for listening to my journey. Remember, you deserve love without price tag support, without suffering, and family that builds rather than breaks. Your worth is non-negotiable, and your story matters. Until next time, stay strong, stay wise, and know that chosen family is often the truest family of all.